I am thrilled to be here today for this amazing event and hope everyone gets an in-depth knowledge on major projects happening around Florida. A quick note about CCIM in the state of Florida. The Florida CCIM chapter consists of over 1,000 members spanning 8 districts from Pensacola all the way down through Key West. We are one of the largest global CCIM real estate communities, and our members generate billions in commercial real estate transactions annually in the state of Florida. Florida CCIM designees are proven leaders in commercial real estate that represent the best that the commercial real estate profession has to offer. Each designee has completed a rigorous, high-level education and accomplished a portfolio of successful transactions showing real-world proven experience. At today's event, you will hear about major infrastructure projects and investments happening around the state of Florida in Florida's major ports, airports, rail systems, rocket programs, and road expansion projects. We thank our great speakers for today's event and extend a thank you to everyone in attendance. We would now like to welcome our keynote speaker, Jason Mahan. Mr. Mahan is the Deputy Secretary of Economic Development and the Chief Operating Manufacturing Officer at Florida Commerce. Mr. Mahan is a Florida native and also a Florida State graduate. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here today. So I work for the Florida Department of Commerce as the Deputy Secretary of Economic Development. Today I'm going to share with you some of our view of what we are focusing on from the state level, and also some of the services that we offer that you all can utilize as you continue to work with your folks coming in and interested in moving to the state or expanding within the state. We'll go ahead and start the presentation. So, wanted to start with an overview of some of our services that we provide at the Florida Department of Commerce. Those include services through our agency, which is Florida Commerce, and also through Select Florida, which is a public-private support organization for the agency. Select Florida really focuses on our international work, our trade missions overseas, and also inbound delegations of companies from foreign countries looking to invest in the state. When we look at services provided by Select Florida, wanted to highlight that we do provide support for companies looking to grow their ability to export. So we have 18 international offices in 16 countries through Select Florida. These are available to help you and companies that are interested in expanding into a new market. We, as a state agency, Florida Commerce, support companies with confidential site selection, help them navigate our state incentives and tax offsets, which I'll get into. We also serve as a state liaison. So if any company is interested in learning a little bit more about how a process is going to work, permitting, ability to look at additional investments that are made in infrastructure, utilities, and those sorts of things, we're happy to help them with that. Finally, we support small businesses with access to capital. We provide through our state office here and also through our partners at the Florida Opportunity Fund investments and loans to small businesses to help them succeed. Next slide. Diving in a little bit further to our economic development toolkit, here are our small business tools listed on the screen. The largest is our State Small Business Credit Initiative, or SSBCI. This provides support for loans in partnership with commercial banking institutions. So those loans from the state side, we participate in loans, we guarantee loans. We also help make sure that a business is able to have the collateral that it needs. We have a new program called the Rural Community Investment Program that was just created by the legislature in 2025, launched in January of this year, where we provide tax credits to companies that invest in rural businesses. We also have the Florida Opportunity Fund, which is a venture capital arm of the state. So the state of Florida actually is making venture capital investments through that fund. And then we work with a variety of small business partners, the Small Business Development Center, SBDC, Florida High Tech Corridor, Florida Export Finance Corporation, Florida First Capital, among many others. I think the main point I just want to make here is we work collaboratively across the ecosystem to make sure that we all are referring to each other's resources. We don't want to have any silos when it comes to small business. I do want to also just point out that as a state, we have wanted to really dive in further into how we support small businesses, because we believe that small business success is ultimately going to have a larger and larger share in our success as a state. Go to the next slide. We do have tools as well to support economic development in the form of grants. These are primarily infrastructure and workforce related grants. Some of the largest are the Job Growth Grant Fund, Rural Infrastructure Fund. So those provide support for infrastructure in our rural communities, and the Job Growth Grant Fund also can provide support for infrastructure and for workforce development. We do have some grants that support our defense communities. And we also have some recovery focused and resiliency focused infrastructure programs that are through the Community Development Block Grant. So those are really designed to help communities following a disaster, following a hurricane, to rebuild stronger and more resilient. And definitely do want to look at how those overlap with supporting business recovery and supporting the business community. Go to the next slide. We also have our traditional economic development toolkit. These are more performance-based tools, including tax credits that are available for businesses that make large capital investment and have large job creation in the state. We also do have a variety of tax exemptions based on a company's industry that they're working in. So that could be manufacturing, space and defense, research and development. Lots of different programs for us as a state to lower the tax burden that a company might face when they're starting a new operation, and simply permanent exemptions for the sales tax on that equipment that's in critical industries like manufacturing. Go to the next slide. We did this year update our target industries. So as a state, every 3 years, we look at all of our strategic industries that as a state we are growing in and have high wage, high demand. So that process began in mid 2025. In January 2026, we launched this new set of target industries. I do want to point out and dive further into a couple of these industries, but just looking at this total list, we've really reorganized to recognize that things like corporate headquarters, logistics, manufacturing, R&D support. All of those industries are not sector specific. And then that we do have some specific sectors that we as a state want to continue to invest in and perform well in. I will say all of these industries we are doing well in. So you could look at each one and find some metric by which we are top 5 in the country. The new industries that we've really begun to focus on this year are ag tech, maritime. Maritime is a large push right now at the federal level, and so we as a state are interested in how do we invest more there. We also wanted to make a couple of changes to recognize that when we look at military and defense, that includes dual use. It includes supporting law enforcement and the equipment that supports our law enforcement. And when we look at aerospace and aviation, that includes advanced air mobility, and new unmanned equipment that's coming out. We can go to the next slide. Diving into a couple of these industries. So aviation and aerospace over the next 3 years are projected to add 14,000 jobs in the state. These are high demand jobs, really going to have a large impact where they're created. When we look at advanced air mobility, Florida is leaning forward to launch new statewide hubs for aircraft testing and validation, specifically at Suntrax. We also, just over the past 3 years, worked on 74 aerospace and aviation projects, and we ended up with a confirmed 3,500 new jobs with almost $1 billion in projected capital investment. Go to the next slide. For maritime, as many of you know, in 2025, the president signed an executive order to focus on restoring America's maritime dominance. This was really recognizing that there's been a lack of investment in a lot of the maritime industry across the nation, and we need to have more production here and more investment in those industries if we're going to maintain our competitive edge with peer countries across the globe. So we did see some real focused efforts and investment at the federal level. And if we go to the next slide, we talk a little bit more about the state's position. So Florida already is one of the largest states in the country when it comes to boat building. So we actually build about 20% of the nation's boats. We lead in yacht manufacturing. We rank first in shipbuilding establishments. Again, most of those are building small vessels. And so we view ourselves as being in a very good position to grow in maritime manufacturing because we do have a lot of these skills that already exist across the state. We also have some really great seaports. I know that you're going to hear from Jacksport today. Jacksport is an excellent seaport in our state, and we really know that those ports have the ability, the workforce to continue to support the maritime industry, including manufacturing, freight, other maritime support activities. So we're really looking forward to continuing to grow in that arena as we see a national focus on maritime and shipbuilding. Next slide. For life sciences, Florida really is leading when it comes to life sciences. We're already #1 in higher education, #2 for pharmaceutical preparation, #2 for medical equipment. So we really do have a strong, thriving life sciences industry in the state. It's really a bit of a misnomer that we hear that you need to go to other parts in the country to start and really have a well-established life sciences business. That's simply not true. Florida has a very strong ecosystem and a very strong workforce when it comes to life sciences. Recently, we have had two major investments in the state. Lupin announced a major investment and new operation in Coral Springs for pharmaceutical manufacturing, and Novartis, which is an advanced research and development, advanced treatment, medical treatment company, has announced that it's investing in Winter Park. Go to the next slide. I do as well just want to, as we kind of look forward to what's next, I do want to take the opportunity to talk to you all about opportunity zones. We are the state agency that's responsible for pulling together recommendations for opportunity zones. We've been working very closely with our communities. We've actually had 80 so far outreach events across the state talking to people about opportunity zones. These are going to provide some really significant tax incentives for folks that invest in those areas. And so we just want to make sure that we give you the opportunity to provide feedback. We are looking for feedback by June 1st. If we go to the next slide, there are some ways to provide that feedback here. You can go to floridajobs.org/opportunity zones, or you can go to the QR code where it says OZ program page, learn more about the program, or Opportunity Zone survey. That's where we actually provide you with that opportunity to give us some feedback about where some good opportunity zones might be across the state. And then we go to the last slide. This is just our resource guide, our toolkit. So if you're ever interested in learning more about the programs that we offer, how those work, who you need to get in touch with, use those resources. They'll provide you with everything that you could need. And if you want to get in touch with me, that is my email address there. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and looking forward to continuing to work with you all.
Mr. Mohan, I appreciate you being on today. Is there a specific sector that you're most excited about in the state of Florida?
I think certainly the newest, biggest push right now is in maritime, and I do want to recognize there's some importance of that being a sort of once in a generation opportunity that the federal government is putting large dollars, large investments, just like frankly, just like we saw a few years ago with semiconductors and the CHIPS Act, where the federal government said we want to make some big investments here. We're now seeing that in maritime. And so we as a state are well positioned to take advantage of those opportunities. And we want to be able to get some. And we're talking about operations that can have, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 jobs within the next 5 years.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time today, and I appreciate you sharing your contact information. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker will be Stephen Hennigan. Mr. Hennigan is the Executive Director and CEO of the Lee County Port Authority and is responsible for the administration, operations, and development of Southwest Florida International Airport and Page Field in Fort Myers. Mr. Hennigan, the screen's yours.
Thank you very much. Let me get this up. Okay, hopefully you can see that. All right, so good morning. Happy to be here, share a little bit of what we've got going on in Southwest Florida and Lee County. RSW at a glance. Currently, our complex, which opened about 21 years ago, has about 800,000 square feet. When it was built, it had 28 gates. It currently has 27. What we have going on right now through two projects is approximately 816,000 square feet of growth. So in the next 2.5 years, the airport is going to be doubling in size. That first project that I'll get into is our checkpoint expansion, followed by our Concourse E project, which when completed will be the largest public works project in Lee County history. The second largest will be our current facility. So we hold both of those records, or will hold both of those records. The key thing about an airport is we are self-supporting. We do not use any local property dollars. So the airline fees, the concession fees, parking, car rentals, that's how we generate our revenue to be able to afford the operation of the airports. So as an airport, we encompass 14,000 acres, which is the third largest airport in land mass in the United States. We are third behind DFW and Denver, but 7,000 of those acres are in our mitigation park. It's a little bit southeast of the airport. We bought that land several years ago to offset our new runway that hopefully by 2040 we'll be building. So we have that all designed, ready to go, the property there, so we can offset the water. We are a Class A port of entry, so we have Customs and Border Protection on site. And the entire airport is designated as a foreign trade zone. The nice thing about this program and the way it's set up in Lee County is you do not have to be on airport property to be part of our foreign trade zone. So as companies are coming into the county, they can take advantage of that. We've had a couple here in the last few months that have taken advantage of that. So They're setting up shop, growing their industry, being able to bring things in bond without having to pay the taxes on it until it leaves their facility. For RSW, from a people standpoint, I noted that Jason had the overall numbers for aviation and aerospace. We're at about 5,500 people working at the airport. We're up about 1,000 the past few years. 450 of those employees are Lee County Port Authority employees across 2 airports. With the first project that I'll discuss, we expect about roughly 600 more people, and then probably upwards of 1,000 more potentially when Concourse E comes online. So from an economic impact, these numbers are, these numbers are a little bit dated, so about 4 years old. Based on our 5 million annual in-plane passengers, we're closer to 6 now. So our total economic impact to the region is probably closer, if not over, $9 billion. But a nice little small airport in Southwest Florida is generating great revenue for the area. So our passenger traffic. 2020, we had the COVID blip. Prior to that, 2019, we were on track. The numbers, you can see going from 2016 to 2019, we're on, almost every 2 years, 1 million plus more passengers. We've had to recover. We had Ian and then the other Milton, the other hurricanes subsequently. This last year set another record with almost 11.2 million passengers. And right now we're on trajectory to have another record-breaking year. As of last week, this slide was a little bit different. We had 16 air carriers. Spirit is no longer on our map due to their bankruptcy. But you can see the majority of our traffic is straight north into the Midwestern part and up northeast into the New England area. We also have solid traffic into Canada with WestJet, Porter, Air Canada specifically, and then also a flight to Frankfurt via Discover Airlines, which is a Lufthansa product. So what we're doing now from a capital improvement, the picture on the screen that you see is our new Concourse E that I'll get into momentarily. But that one, what you're looking at there is 14 gates, which is going to be double the size of any of our concourses that we have now, as well as a whole bunch of associated taxiway work. The first one I want to hit is our phase 1 expansion. It's consolidating our checkpoint and adding some concessions. The airport was designed probably close to 30 years ago with a 5-year build to have 3 concourses, B, C, and D. We are building E right now, and in the future we will build A. But the airport was designed pre 9/11. And when 9/11 happened and the security changed and TSA was stood up, we had to essentially block off all 3 of our concourses, which led to some constraints. With this new process, everything will be in a centrally located checkpoint, and passengers will be able to flow freely throughout the whole airport, much like you'd be used to at a larger hub facility. And again, this is going to add about 215,000 new square feet. A lot of it's going to be concessions, that consolidated checkpoint, as well as some public circulation. So this is what we look like today. On top, we have the 3 segregated checkpoints. In the future, the lower picture will be our new center checkpoint, and all of that, salmonish color will be our new floor space that we're building right now. At the end, the blue is all going to be brand new. We have, if you hear the noise behind me, I apologize. It's the sound of progress, but they're taking out the walls and part of the building to do that expansion as we speak. Picture on the left is the picture of that in progress. One of the, find my laser pointer here. One of the nice things about these pole cranes is we were able to put them on rails so they can go back and forth on both sides if they have any heavy lifts. This is the section right behind my office that's actually no longer there. This is all gone and will be rebuilt. And then this is the low wing. It's basically redundant on both sides, about 110,000 square feet on either side to get that space. The picture on the right is our temporary checkpoint that we had to build. We were able to come in and do the first portion of space to basically take the bigger chunk of the terminal complex. We're basically doing, akin to open heart surgery while we're building this. So we're able to build this while we take down the majority of the building that you see in the picture on the left. And then we'll once that's up in about a year and a half, we'll go back, recover this space to finalize the project. At the end of the day, this is what that space will look like. So right now, this is our new consolidated checkpoint in this area. Once it's done, we will have 16 lanes. This is a new feature for us. We will have our first lounge ever at the airport. It will be a Delta lounge. So we're very excited about that. And then this would be, for people familiar with the airport, the ramp down to C concourse. But the nice thing about this is the 30-year-old roof line is going to be replaced by, vibrant, almost 4-story lights, terrazzo floors as opposed to the old tile, and that real sense of feel with the colors that are akin to Southwest Florida. Again, going towards Concourse B, a lot of upgrades. Right now, this is pre-security. All the way down here would be your security checkpoint, but we're going to be automating our exits. So again, once you come through, you'll be able to walk freely. For phase 2, this is our big project. It's our 14-gate project. This is the 600,000 square feet behemoth that we're building out to our west. It's going to have a new checkpoint, which basically means so we'll go from, it's kind of weird, we're going from 3 checkpoints to 1 with the consolidated, and this will add back a second checkpoint with 9 lanes. So that will be over in this area, and then the 14 gates out. And again, just to mention, you look at B, C, and D and kind of swing that over. It's going to be a big difference, a big look and feel difference to this airport. It's going to be, very, very wide open and obviously new, but really provide that sense of growth that we need here to be able to have the future capacity that the airlines are asking for. So this is the picture on the left, the outside of that building. It doesn't look very glamorous, but those are the windows going in. The picture on the right, this is actually from the center. So again, if you were entering any of our other concourses, that would be the end, but this is the halfway point with our inside project getting built. At the end of the day, the front will be very similar to the rest of our terminal entryway. One of the differences, though, is this mezzanine that you see up here. As part of our overall project to enhance the customer experience, we're trying to get passengers off of the crosswalks. So we'll be building 3 bridges over the roads. You'll see some vertical circulation escalators on the left, but this will be that nice mezzanine level that you'll be able to go into a nice covered walkway over to our parking garage and our car rental facility. Inside the building, at the end, you'll have, it's called a head house. It's a huge space. We'll have 5 gates there. This is kind of our centerpiece of our design. This is going to be a concession, a restaurant, and a bar. The nice thing about these windows is it has full access to the majority of our approach path to our runway. The windows, if you're looking due west, you will see the sunset. So it's a nice place for people to, capture that last sunset while watching airplanes, and again, give that nice sense of place before they go home or when they arrive into Southwest Florida. Some of the other things, excuse me, that we're undertaking as part of this capacity growth is a new rental car and parking expansion. Right now, everything comes in. This is our terminal access road. and parses off into various different ways. Either you're coming up or you're going into our parking garage or our car rental return. One of the first things we're doing right now is an enabling project. If you're going to, this is our long-term lot. If you're going to our long-term lot, you'll have a dedicated lane with signage into our long-term lot. If you're going into our rental car, same thing, a dedicated lane going right to a rental car. So the only reason you would need to come up close, excuse me, would be if you're dropping somebody off or hitting our our short-term lot. With this car rental expansion, we are undertaking a parking garage expansion by adding 2 levels. To be able to do that, we have to build this area down here. It becomes future car rental storage. But the first enabling project will basically just be flat work to be able to have us offset the parking garage while we're building it. And then eventually they'll build these buildings to be able to service the rental cars here. These items are currently on the north side of the airport, where we're trying to build our Skyplex location, which I'll get into in a second. So moving this is kind of critical to not only the operations and the efficiencies of the car rental agencies, but to our future growth plans for our non-aeronautical revenue on our north side. So Skyplex. Skyplex is our north side of our campus. The old airport used to be right about up in here. The new airport is here. So that car rental picture I just showed you is going to be in this section. It is currently up in this section. So this is essentially a good cartoon drawing of some future potential. Very mixed use. We have our lakes here, but we have a lot of ability to do various things and grow our non-aeronautical revenue. I guess I should explain that. So we have 2 net revenue streams. Aeronautical, easiest way to think about it is something derived from an airplane, so a landing fee, a fuel flowage fee. And non-aeronautical revenue are land leases, concessions, parking, things of that nature. We are a little complex with how we have to do things, though. So per the FAA, we cannot sell you land. We can only lease you land. Right now, the FAA mandates that we cannot do any leases beyond 50 years. And at that 50-year mark, or whatever that duration of your lease, any improvements and any structures revert back to the Port Authority. The good thing, though, is we have roughly 1,100 acres of land to work with. So we have a lot of options. Our goal is to create shovel-ready sites because that allows us to have a higher per square foot cost. The hiccup that we've had here is our funding availability. We had some incremental costs with our phase 1 projects. It almost doubled for those of you who've been keeping track. So we had to fund that to be able to finish it, which took some funding away from being able to do this. Because again, being able to be self-funded, we got to have that money to be able to do that. So we're working through those challenges. But on the bright side, there's very strong development characteristics in the area. We have about 1.5 miles to I-75. The area is very limited for developable industrial land. Most of the area surrounding the airport is under development of some aspect right now, either people moving in or ground being broken. And we also have existing high-profile tenants that I'll get to on the following slide. But from an opportunity standpoint, the nice thing about Skyplex is it's right across from JetBlue Park, which is the home of the Boston Red Sox. So we have a lot of options there to do a shopping, dining, entertainment kind of area that we're really lacking on this side of town. With some campus-style offices, there's a great picture of an option, around one of our existing waterways, a hotel that is again needed in the area, and then from an aeronautical opportunity, more fixed base operators, FBOs, cargo support facilities, things of that nature. Right now, so the blue is Skyplex. We own the public shopping center, so it's a very, I guess a neighborhood type of a shopping center, grocery stores. That is part of our inventory. Gartner has their headquarters here, as well as Alta Resources. They are a huge behind the scenes outsourced customer service, sales and fulfillment center. In the works right now, we have three major projects. The first is our cold storage facility. They're looking right now to do truck-based operations and then growing into air cargo, basically with fruits, flowers, things that are currently coming into Miami or Fort Lauderdale. If they can come into here, it saves the time, a little bit fresher for both of those commodities. Arthrex, this is our big one. They are based out of Naples. They have facilities in several locations in Southwest Florida, as well as in the Carolinas. Their facility that they're replacing is currently about 8 miles to the east, or correction, to the west of the airport. And one of the things that they'll be doing is building a 1 million square foot, both manufacturing and distribution facility on airport property, which will get them roughly a half a mile to FedEx. So it'll allow them to very much streamline their operation. They are a global distributor of orthopedics, so they'll be able to reach their market much quicker. 8 miles doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're familiar with Fort Myers during season, layered with spring training, their location is right behind the Minnesota Twins spring training facility. It gets pretty congested. So they're putting a lot of money into this project. We're breaking ground here in, I guess, next month, 2 weeks, to get it shovel ready, which will take about a year, at which time they'll be able to develop their 1 million square feet. And the last big project we're doing right now is another FBO. We have a current one. This will give us a second one here. With that 30-year ground lease, they've come in and asked for 27 acres. You can see at the bottom, it'll be about 2,500 square foot of terminal space. So lobby area and pilot area, a couple hangars to start with, and then about 200,000 square feet of paved aircraft and parking.
Mr. Hennigan, I appreciate you joining us today. We've run out of time, but I did have a question. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Right there.
Skyplex. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have, real quick, is there one cost pressure point that you're most worried about right now with your airport?
Yeah, for us being self-funded, our cost pressure point is our current projects. We are over budget on our phase one because of some design errors. Now we're getting hit with some additional costs from tariffs that we have to cover. When you're building a $1 billion building, tariffs start racking up pretty quick. So that's kind of our pressure point, which is why we're taking a cautious approach. We were, I would say, gung-ho, very excited about Skyplex and the opportunities, but we're working through that funding as we finalize these next 2 years and get these big projects completed.
Okay, well, I appreciate you joining us today, and we would love to share those slides, and appreciate your time. Our next speaker is Dr. Joshua Harris. Mr. Harris is a leading real estate economist and investment strategist specializing in real estate development, finance, and business leadership strategy. Mr. Harris holds a PhD in finance from UCF and remains an active academic director and adjunct professor of real estate at Fordham University.
Right. Excellent. It's great to be here on this fine morning. Obviously, when I was talking with Liz and the people planning this, and they were telling me about the various panels, I kind of quickly raised my hand for the runways one because it's kind of an area of strong personal interest. I actually got my pilot's license while I was in high school, and my first real job in real estate, although I didn't quite call it at that time, was an internship with the Sebring Airport Authority at the General Aviation Airport in Sebring, Florida. So I got to kind of discover this, and I've always had a very a strong affinity for the linkages between aviation and real estate. And today I'm going to talk, kind of just a quick presentation, a little bit overview of something I like to call the Aerotropolis effect. I'll give you a little bit of distinction what that means in a minute. But Florida is a state that has grown a lot, as you know, over these last several decades. And the history of Florida is kind of interesting, right? Because it was obviously kind of a very hot swamp, and depending on your point of view, it still is a hot swamp we get around. But now we have this marvelous thing called air conditioning. But truthfully, it's been our transportation linkages. Obviously, started with rail with Henry Flagler, but really the real growth, both of tourism, relocation of both businesses, like everything we're hearing about, like from the Florida Commerce Department, and obviously even just population, is the fact that we are aero connected to the rest of the country. So it's an important thing. So we'll start off with just talking about Central Florida. I've returned to Orlando, and I put this slide together using data from the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority on traffic passenger trends. You can kind of see from 2013 through the year end of 2025. Obviously, you can see where COVID had quite an impact. But yes, as anybody who flies, and I fly enough to get my premier status, with Delta every time I go in and out, that it is ever crowded, and those planes are ever booked. In fact, I'm always on Orlando flights where it feels like they're asking for volunteers, trying to offer them various levels of what do we want to call it, your discounts or future credits, whatever it is, in order to allow yourself to get bumped. And if we even look at that, let me put this up here. We actually did grow. Orlando is the 7th busiest airport in the country, and I'm pretty sure that still makes us the busiest in Florida. Obviously, South Florida has split operations between Miami International, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm. We actually saw quite a bit of international growth last year, slight fall back into domestic. And my guess is there's some trade-off there, right? Because more international flights in, people aren't coming in domestically because they can take direct international flights. And that's actually one of the things across about many of our major airports in Florida is we have a lot more direct flights over, especially to Europe, certainly Canada. In fact, I'll tell you a lot of the drop-off that we've seen in some places only been from Canada. And increasingly we have for, also outbound tourism effects, a lot of international flights to all over the Caribbean as well as South America. The only thing we don't really have is flights to Asia, which we've actually did have in Orlando. It was a series of kind of like charter type flights that I think you could buy a ticket from. We did have some direct flights from Orlando International to Tokyo that went early this year, but my understanding is that's not a consistent service, at least not yet. I'm actually going to Tokyo in a couple of weeks for a big conference, and I have to change planes in Minneapolis. So I would totally love if we had a couple of direct flights to Asia, but it's quite a long flight, so it's not it has to be pretty profitable in order to make that work. But if you're wondering what is the value of this, why do we look at passenger traffic trends? It is powering one of the biggest parts of tourism, which is obviously a statewide effect. These are the Orlando numbers. This just came out. We had another record number of visitors. So despite whatever you hear in the news about international upset with the U.S. or all the various geopolitical things, which obviously are having impacts here or there, in fact, you can notice Canada was really the only country, which is still number one, candidly, right into Orlando at least, did have a fall off. So when we think about aviation, right, and runways, and obviously if you think about tourism, I know look, people could drive to Florida from all the cruising areas. I don't know how many we actually get coming in vis-a-vis Amtrak. Obviously, we can talk about Brightline being increasingly useful for at least for intra-state transit between Orlando and, of course, Miami. But we are generally getting it through aviation. So what does this all mean? So what is this Aerotropolis effect? Why is it so important? So this phrase, Aerotropolis, comes from a book. This was actually written by a couple of my friends, Greg Lindsay in particular. I will just say this book, Aerotropolis, I believe it came out around 2011, 2012. Obviously, it's on Amazon or wherever. I'm assuming you can find it there. I would just say, in terms of understanding real estate and understanding cities, certainly for a CCIM audience, I would put this as a must read. Candidly, what this talks about is that in this modern world, right, that we have been in since essentially the post-World War II period, airports and then thus airport connectivity has been the base of modern cities, right? So if we think about originally, right, New York City, Baltimore, Boston, all those cities were founded by where essentially, transatlantic shipping routes started, right? So they were protected inner harbors for ships coming across the Atlantic. We obviously then had some of the river cities like New Orleans, Montreal, Quebec, etc. And then, of course, we had trains that connected us out to St. Louis, Chicago, obviously onwards to San Francisco. But now really we have cities that have risen candidly because of their airports and their connectivity. And look, I think Dallas Fort Worth is a prime example. You look around the Washington, D.C. area, especially out in Northern Virginia. And candidly, I would say definitely cities like Orlando, Tampa, and even Miami, their modern growth, the things that have made these now growing from kind of much smaller little towns into these big international mega gateway cities. I mean, Miami is a legitimate gateway city. It is because of the aero connectivity. So Florida, like I said, we will continue to grow by this. It's important to note that, I mean, our international tourism requires this global air network to be connected. So to the extent, and I think that was a great presentation about, the Southwest Florida International Airport, right, as they grow, I bet you they're going to have more and more global travel, and they're going to have more and more direct flights, and you're seeing that. I think Tampa's getting a big increase. Obviously, Orlando and Miami have had this for quite a long time, but you're starting to see more and more international direct flights, especially I think Tampa's probably the best. And when we think about the growth, I mean, I know we've always heard these discussions about people coming from New York. Look, I spent 6 years in New York and moved back. I think I'm a return homer. I was, born in Miami, but all these New Yorkers coming out and increasingly people from California and elsewhere. One of the things that makes it work, like how is it? Why did I decide to return to Orlando? One of the reasons why is I still teach up in Florida. I do teach online remotely, but I do go up there quite often. I'm going up there next week for sets of meetings. I can literally leave my house quite early in the morning, I'll add, get to the airport, fly to New York, do a bunch of meetings. I can go back to the airport, one of the multiple airports here, and fly home and essentially be in my bed. It might be close to midnight. That's a very long day. But the truth is, you can do that from multiple Florida cities, even smaller ones, right? In fact, we're seeing the Naples airport just got announced that they're going to get some direct flights vis-a-vis American Airlines, I think, to Charlotte. I haven't seen I'm not sure if the exact routes have been published, but it's really important for all this growth, and especially as we have increasingly wealthier people moving in, higher incomes, et cetera. These airports are very, very important. And candidly, when you look at the airport connectivity, we'll decide, well, hey, can I live there? Is it going to work, right? So I think, cities like Melbourne, even up in Daytona Beach, some of these other smaller airports, I think Punta Gorda now is right. All these airports are trying to get more and more direct service. It's really important for those areas. So the extent that you can support that locally, obviously, is going to be big for any of your local markets. Obviously, business needs air connectivity. So if you look at Dallas, has probably been one of the most successful cities in the country for headquarter relocation. In fact, a lot of stuff, literally leaving Chicago, coming out. If you think about it, where Dallas is located, right, they have a huge airport in DFW, and then they have the second Love Field. You can be in Dallas and then get basically, coast to coast, fairly equal flights, both to the West Coast and the East Coast. We've seen this in Orlando for many decades, where companies will come here, choose to have their headquarters, choose to have their operations because they can move their people around. So when we think about headquarter relocation, air connectivity, and now, in fact, Aerotropolis, what you'll read about in that book, if you decide to read it, is literally cities that are kind of directly connected to airports, and sort of this idea that you can get in and out, kind of like that sort of Sim City themed cover suggests, right? So I'll talk a bit about this here. Lake Nona. If you don't know, or if you haven't been to Central Florida, I'm sure a CCM audience, by most of you know about Lake Nona. This is a part of the city of Orlando, a very large development by Tavistock. It is effectively one of Florida's first true aerotropolis communities, in that it is literally right outside of Orlando International Airport. It can be about 10, 15 minutes to get you to the parking lot and then onward to the gate. And I'll tell you, I've ran into people who work for some very large finance and real estate type companies up in New York. They decided, in this post-COVID world where we're all in this, more disconnected, ability to work with, sort of smaller 2-3 day, call it in-person office jobs, where they were literally living in Lake Nona. They had like a place with a friend, they could say. So they were flying up to New York Tuesday morning, staying Tuesday, Wednesday, then flying home Thursday night, right? And they were trying to basically have a Florida life, go back to work. Not sure if that lasts long term, but it's just showing you that the more that these things work, these kind of locations, these big communities that are within a short proximity to the airports, have a unique draw. I think about Wall Street South. I'm sure you've heard this phrase, obviously. Now, there's a lot of it in Miami, and Miami's got Miami International there, but truthfully, one of the big expansion stories is Palm Beach International, right? I mean, West Palm Beach, which does have, and Boca Raton, all those things, very, very critical parts of our Wall Street South expansion, all these big companies moving down. PBI and getting continual growth in service, because obviously they have tons of flights that go back and forth, certainly to New York, to DC, to Chicago, et cetera. Basically means, I think we can have an office there. It doesn't feel as disconnected. And candidly, I think without our air network, we would not have this. So it's a very critical part. And candidly, why I actually do think we will see more and more of these firms. I mean, it's like, it's not strictly taxes and weather, right? We can all talk about taxes and weather, wonderful things about Florida, but it is our interconnectivity. Um, Tampa is the other area that I kind of watch. I mean, look, Orlando's had a great airport. Although I mean it's kind of outdated, we don't have enough parking. I can speak personally quite critical of this. That's my, by the way, quick personal side. If you want to ask Josh, how do you know how much Orlando has grown since I moved away from, I got recruited away from UCF in 2017 to go work for NYU. Then I was working with Skanska Commercial Development, we were headquartered. I had my office at the Empire State Building, all this, and then I moved back at middle of 2023. So Josh, how do you measure the growth? Well, when I left in 2017, I could basically find a parking spot all over Orlando International 7 days a week. No problem. Maybe it'd be real bad during Christmas or Thanksgiving, when I really wouldn't want to fly myself. Now it's like every day of the week, Orlando International runs out of parking, right? So they're building it. They're doing a bunch of expansions. They're actually working on this. So Orlando's had it for a long time because of Walt Disney World. We know that. So our business community in Orlando is always drafted off of this. Tampa is growing with a lot of business connectivity. We're seeing huge growth in the Tampa Bay region. I mean, I actually think Tampa is probably, to the extent we're even going to have one, the next sort of version of an Austin or a Nashville story. I would give you a whole other presentation on that. But one of the most critical things that's going to work for Tampa is that that they have to keep making those investments into Tampa International. I would strongly support or hope that St. Petersburg, which is kind of the alternative airport, obviously in Pinellas County, would do similar upgrades and get more service in and out of there. So it's a bit of alternative focus. And of course, that these things are going to make the economy and these linkages matter. So that's kind of my quick update. So I'm going to turn it back over, and I can stay on if you have any questions now, or we could wait.
Okay, a quick question. What airline mix do you see projected for the Orlando market over the next 5 years? Is it going to be more leisure? Do you think they're going to be more low-cost growth carriers, more business travel?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Spirit bankruptcy obviously impacts Orlando a lot, and not as much as Fort Lauderdale, where they were sort of hubbing from. But I think you're going to see a lot of rush. We don't really have a dominant carrier in the sense that Southwest is probably the biggest carrier, but Delta has sort of flirted turning Orlando into not really quite a full hub, but what they call a focus city. In fact, now Delta has direct flights to non-hub cities like DC, actually even Miami, and they've added more and more. So I think you're going to have a lot of airlines all competing because look, Orlando has obviously leisure travelers, like the people that travel once every 5 years to bring their family to Disney. They also have, by the way, Orlando is getting tons and tons of conference business. And I don't know if you're following the news about what's happening up in New York. They're just, the union contracts keep rate. I think like the average salary or something of the housekeeper is going to take over $100,000 in New York. So like the cost of the hotels and meetings in New York is going to get more and more expensive. So I think you're going to have a lot more business and business meetings in Orlando, and those people want to get their normal first class seats and et cetera. So I think that area is going to grow. But candidly, one of the biggest areas of growth for Orlando has just been servicing the residential population, like people like myself who now home airport there. So I think the dominant mix is all of the above. Candidly, I do think I do think that international directs into Orlando will be a growing affair, and I think you'll see more and more of the European. Certainly, we already have the Middle East carriers. I know they got. I mean, obviously, they're kind of disrupted by the whole war situation, but so I think it's going to be a good race sprint. I am very curious to who's going to pick up the Spirit gates and who's going to try to cover those routes. I'm going to guess JetBlue is going to jump all over it. Frontier is probably going to expand. So you'll see them growing just to kind of fill in the Spirit vacuum. But I'm telling you, Delta is wanting to upgrade that airport a lot too. So I think I can't wait to see who wins that race, to be honest with you, as a flyer out of Orlando.
Okay, Mr. Harris, I appreciate your time. Very insightful, and we'll definitely have to try to research that book.
Excellent.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Miss Smitha Radhak Krishnan. Ms. Radhak Krishnan leads Tampa International Airport's planning and development and maintenance teams. Prior to joining Tampa International Airport, she worked for Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport for 11 years. The screen is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity, Florida CCIM. I'm really delighted to be here and to be able to talk about America's favorite airport. Before I get into all things TPA, I want to give you a little factoid that not many of you probably know, that this region, Tampa Bay, was the birthplace for commercial aviation. So back in 1914, January 1st, the very first paid passenger aircraft, which was a seaplane, essentially was flown from St. Petersburg to Tampa downtown, a 23-mile journey, and that set the foundation for the aviation history that this region has seen since. And for those of you who have been here or seen the configuration of our airport, it's a hub and spoke. It's an iconic hub and spoke model with the land side being in the center with that main terminal and all the air sides being all around it on a radial circle. So that the version of that has taken an evolution all the way from the 30s when this airport was a World War II Army base called Drew Field, and leading up to the form we see today that was built in 71. And the CEO at the time, George Bean, he had the vision that no passenger should have to walk more than 700 feet from the curb to the gate. And how that was made possible was by the first of its kind in the world automated people mover, the driverless ones that connected the main terminal to all these air sites, as you can see here. Today, we have grown to support close to 26 million passengers with our 4 air sites, 58 gates. And not only do we manage the Tampa International Airport, the Hillsborough County Aviation Authority also is responsible for 3 thriving general aviation airports. And much like some of the sister airports were saying, ours is not a single airline hub. We have plenty of primary airline carriers that have an equal market position. However, Southwest is a little higher than the rest, with Delta, American, and United following. Right now, we have over 100 nonstop destinations, 22 of which are international, and we're growing every single day. With all that aviation activities, as you heard about Aerotropolis, it doesn't just stop with aviation, aeronautical, non-aeronautical, and all the related economic development. There, we have an impact of over $11.3 billion. Now, this is dated, it's 2022, and the next one is going to come up, which I do not doubt it's going to be way more than that. We are the 27th busiest airport in the country and have over 10,500 employees that come here both for working for the airport and our various tenants. Now, this shows our passenger growth, right? Starting from 2015, where we were just over 18 million to where we are today, just shy of 2025, and where we forecast to be growing. One thing that airports have to do every 6 to 7 years is we have to not only create a master plan, but also keep it updated. We have to forecast where this airport is going to grow in the next 20-year horizon based on airline forecasts, based on the need to support the growth of the region. And this is important because that lays the roadmap for us of how do we grow the airport's ecosystem to be able to support that kind of passenger volumes, right? Because we all know growth for the ecosystem cannot happen with one project and over just a year. It has to happen over time. So the 2035, which is 10 years from now, what this master plan showed is we'll be jumping by almost 10 million passengers. So how do we do that? In 2012, the master plan we did, it charted out a whole roadmap for us on how do we grow, like I said, the entire ecosystem to support that kind of passenger volume. So the first phase, what we call the decongestion phase, what we did is removed everything from our central hub, which is our main terminal, things that do not need to be there. We removed the rental car center. We built it a little south of it. We connected that with an automated people mover. We decongested the main terminal, built more concession space. In the second phase, which we call the enabling, we removed our administrative building, which used to be right in the center, and built where I'm sitting here right now. It's a Class A premium office building. That's LEED Platinum and all that. So, but that is also connected with a new automated people mover to the main terminal. The curbside capacity, we increased that. We almost doubled it during phase 2, and I'll go into it in a little bit. Central utility plant. When you expand a building, you need all that air and heating to support that. All that was done in phase 2. Now we are in the phase 3, which of course is the biggest puzzle piece of that growth, which is adding the gates, the 16 gates through Airside D, which I'm going to go into in a little bit. So remember I mentioned about how we doubled our curbside capacity in our phase 2. This we were the first airport in the US to come up with a concept called express curbside. So we have both blue and red express curbsides, which differentiates passengers who do not have a bag to check in to give them a seamless journey, transcending, not having to go through the ticket levels or any of that to directly go to the concourse transfer levels. And this has helped us tremendously, not just adding more capacity, but decongesting all our landside road network. The Red Side Express opened last year. The Blue Express opened a few years prior to that. This has won several awards for the innovative way this has helped with congestion and capacity. Another project that we also completed last year is much like, RSW, and then we had, some of these checkpoints were built pre 9/11, right, when we did not have the screening requirements, whatnot. So we didn't have the space for the queue up, for the volume of passenger growth, as well as the screening. So we expanded to the checkpoints in 2 of our air sides by 20,000 square foot each, and have state-of-the-art screening equipment, all of that to go with it. So very excited about these 2 opening last year. Another project that we have ongoing, this is cyclical in nature. As you saw early on in my slides, we were the first, not just airport, first building to have automated people movers in the world. And so right now we are in generation 3. Every 30 years, we have to replace. That's the life cycle of these automated people movers. But the version we have today is like comparing Model T to a Tesla, the first version versus version 3. This is ongoing. We will have all of them completed by end of this year. And of course, the new Airside D will have that start early next year as well. Now, aside from all the growth-related projects, we keep investing heavily on our existing assets that have reached either the end of life. What we call them is a capital improvement program. It's a different program from a master plan program. Just this year, we have over 34 projects in that category, valued at over 800 million. Here's an example of a project that is in design that falls under that. We have 2 primary runways, runway 1 right and 1 left. And by virtue of being so close to the bay, as you can imagine, the water table is pretty high. 1 right has reached close to that 30-year point with the water table. We are at a point that we cannot just rehabilitate that runway like a lot of airports can. We have to completely rebuild. And as you can imagine, a runway of that magnitude, right, it's going to be a few years of closure. So what we are having to do is make sure we invest money on the other runway that's going to take all the capacity for a few years onto itself, which is our 1 left, before we close down 1 right. So a lot of work happening on our airfield as well over the next few years. What this quagmire that you see here, it is actually a schematics of our baggage handling system, and which is located right now in the lowest level of our main terminal building, and that is the epicenter. That is the brain of baggage handling that then takes it to the different air sites underneath these shuttle guideways. We are in the process of not only expanding it to accommodate the new air site that we're adding, but we are taking advantage of the fact and completely modernizing it. We're using a state-of-the-art technology called cross-belt sorters that have been used in Europe for several years, but we'll probably be the second ones in the US to have this when it's open in 2029. What that helps us do is much higher throughput, efficiency, redundancy, and also gives us the any bag, any airside capacity, which is very vital for our growth. And I would say this is an incredibly complex project because this is like doing an open heart surgery when you have an operating baggage system to be building a new one alongside it without skipping a beat. Here's another big milestone project. It's not a milestone yet because it's still in the design, but it's going to be a big one for us when it's done, because for the first time since we opened in 1971 in our current form, are we completely renovating our ticket lobby, which is an entire floor within our main terminal. And what we're trying to do with this is not only are we expanding it to get the capacity to take us to 35, 38 million passengers, but we are opening it up, making it more roomy, well lit, better customer experience through more queuing lanes, and using technology through biometrics and self-service backdrops to enable that seamless passenger journey that our travelers have come to expect. Now, moving to our crown jewel project, Airside D. Many of you might have heard about this project. This is going to be, when it opens in 2029, it'll become our international terminal, replacing the international operations that's currently in F. This is over 600,000 square foot, over double the size of our biggest airside right now. And if you can see, it's a pretty huge building. And the depth of it is over 2 football fields, and the length is a football field and a half long. And because of which we have to bring natural light to the center core of that building. So that's why you see this whole layered cake kind of a design, which allows us to have the clear story to bring light all to the center. What it also does is gives us the ability to create a real central oasis space that we can activate in many ways. So here is a rendering of what that central space from the inside looks. The double height with all the gates surrounding it. What we envision here is a huge display of immersive digital experience. So not only will that help with the surprise and delight for the passengers as they come through the concessions, but as they go and sit at the gate and they're able to drink a glass of wine while waiting for their flights, they can really immerse in the beauty of that. And the theme of this airside is Tranquil Tampa. And what we have tried to do is bring in the natural beauty of the region through our natural springs, our beautiful white powdered sugar sand beaches, all into the passenger's journey through that. Here is an image looking up to the mezzanine level of that airside. We're going to have 2 lounges here. Delta is our anchor tenant, will be our anchor tenant here. So Delta Lounge is one of that. And because this is also going to be our international, there'll be a common use lounge that we will be building here in this building. This airside will also have playscapes, sensory rooms, all of that, especially since you'll have passengers with more dwell time on the international side. So that is very important to us. Here's a view. This airside will have glass jet bridges. So, passengers coming in can see the beautiful sunset across the bay and, really capitalize on a panoptic view all around. Here is a yes.
We're running out of time. Do you see
Yes.
commercial airfare expanding at the airport?
Commercial airfare?
As in non
Aeronautical. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we do have several parcels of land that are yet to be developed. As as I mentioned earlier, this office complex is one. We have in our plans to have another office complex potentially in the near future. And this is a great place for FBOs and MROs. We've been having hangars. We are also vitalizing a lot of our industrial spaces. And as many of you might be reading in the news, the Rays Stadium is, they are working on locating adjacent to the airport, and that'll open up a whole lot of opportunities in itself for the commercial lines, for sure.
With having so much growth in these new terminals, what's the best way to get in touch with you for retail and warehouse type users?
So here is my email address if you want to take note of that. You can send it my way. And right now, aside from design, development, construction, and maintenance, I also have commercial real estate and air service development rolling up to me. So, I can divert you to the right personnel as well within my team.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time today and all of that knowledge. Being in Tampa, I love to see the airport growing, and it's a fabulous airport. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Am I making the introductions now, Sage?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, my name is Todd Dantzler. I am a CCIM and partner with Saunders Real Estate in Lakeland. And Liz told me I had to tell everyone when I got my CCIM designation. So my number is 4187, and I was initiated November 10th, 1991. So Liz, don't write me any nasty emails. I called our next speaker, Aubrey Brown, yesterday just to kind of talk a little bit about it. And the first words out of his mouth were, I almost got bit by a snake. He didn't even say hello. And I said, that is the greatest introduction and opening line of a speaker I've ever heard. So this should be a fun session. Aubrey Brown is the Senior Manager Business Development of CSX Transportation. And he handles all of Georgia and Florida. He's responsible for influencing the location of new industry along CSX and connecting short line properties. Aubrey understands the CSX operating network and positively influences the development of new sites for customers at locations that complement the network operations. Aubrey serves as an advocate of rail use to the business community and economic development partners, and he works not only with existing and potential customers, but also with representatives of state and local government agencies, which is very important, and short line railroad partners to help facilitate these projects. His business development team maintains an extensive inventory of potential sites for new or expanded customer location, and he works with many departments throughout the company to help bring projects to fruition. Aubrey is a member of the Georgia Economic Developers Association, Georgia Railroad Association, Georgia Allies, Aerotropolis Atlanta Alliance, Industrial Asset Management Council, the Florida Freight Advisory Committee, Florida Economic Development Conference, and the Southern Economic Development Council. If you have a project that needs rail in Florida or Georgia, you need to track down Aubrey and talk to him. He's a veteran of the South African Navy and received his law degree from the University of Pretoria in South Africa and his MBA from the University of Phoenix. He is fluent in English, Afrikaans, I hope I said that right, and Italian. Aubrey, thank you for that intro that you provided, and take it away.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and what a pleasure to be here. About the snake story, it was on a railroad track. Be very careful when you're walking around. Luckily, it was a harmless snake. It was a black snake, which is a good snake. Anyway, wanted to give you an overview of, first of all, the rail industry. Let me just get this. Okay, so we're going to get a railroad overview. So the railroads in the United States began in 1827, and the railroads gave us standardized times. And prior to that, there was no standardized times. And the freight rail network in the United States is over 140,000 miles of freight track. And there are about 800 railroads, which are all freight railroads. Now, there's passenger as well, but the important point here is that 70% of the track in the United States is actually privately owned by the railroads. Let me just get back to, excuse me, I lost my screen here for a minute, but hang on just a second. Beg your pardon. Let me just get back to the, okay, so railroads in the United States generate approximately 233 billion in economic output in the United States every year. I'm just trying to, excuse me, guys, I've got this. I'm in the layout. Give me just a second. Something's happened here. Hold on just a minute. I can't get to the next slide. Just bear with me. Excuse me. Can you see it? Hold on. Okay, I'm going to share it again. Just a minute. Hold on just a second. All right, let's see. Okay, here we go. Right, so let's go to the next slide. Beg your pardon. Okay, so in the North America, the Class 1 railroads are railroads with operating revenue of over $250 million. And those railroads are the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, the Canadian National, the CPKC, CSX Transportation, the Norfolk Southern Railroad, and the Union Pacific. Now, the Amtrak passenger line is in there, but that is the only state-run passenger service in the entire country. A Class 2 railroad is a railroad that has operating ratio between 20 million and 250 million. And the largest would be a Florida railroad in that category would be the Florida East Coast Railroad, which really runs from Jacksonville down to Miami. And then there are a number of Class 3 railroads, and the Class 3 railroads have operating ratio which is below $20 million per year. Now, a typical diesel locomotive, the weight of a locomotive it's pretty intense, and that excludes 5,000 gallons of diesel. The average train length of a freight train is around 5,300 feet, and the Class 1 railroads have started building much longer sidings, and you're now finding that with a distributed power, that's a locomotive in the middle of a train. Regularly, trains can be as long as 16,000 feet. And then railroads operate in the United States and are governed by the Federal Railroad Administration, which publishes standards. And the Federal Railroad Administration track speeds for freight railroads vary from 10 miles an hour to 79 miles an hour. And for passenger rail, it can vary from 10 miles to 220 miles. Now, railroads only handle about 40% of freight in the United States. However, one important thing to remember is that one railroad boxcar replaces up to the volume of 3 semi-trucks. And then railroads normally generate substantive rail revenue for the states, for the counties. And, the railroads play a critical role in moving the nation's economy forward. And the railroads move almost 1 billion tons of hazardous chemicals by rail. That's the way you want to ship them. And the other thing that we like to put out as an industry is that the railroads can move 1 ton of freight 500 miles on a gallon of fuel. This is just a map, and these slides will be made available to the group just to show you what the railroads, the main railroads in the United States look like, just to give you an idea of that interconnectivity. And now specifically turning to the state of Florida. So the economic impact in the state of Florida, we have about an average of 46 billion shipments that are inbound into the state. Outbound from Florida, and 63 billion inbound. So you see there is somewhat of an imbalance. Many of the trains come in loaded and leave with less freight. Freight rail supports many jobs in the state of Florida. And in total, the freight rail industry in Florida provides about 56 billion in labor income, 83 billion in value added, and tax revenue of almost $6 billion a year. Now, the ports in the state of Florida are all served by rail. Jacksport, that will be speaking a little later, served directly by CSX. The Kennedy Space Center, Port Canaveral, is served by the Florida East Coast. Port Miami, served by the FEC. Port Everglades is served by the FEC. Port Manatee, served by CSX. The Port of Palm Beach, served by the FEC. And the Port of Tampa, served by CSX. Intermodal cars, those are containers on trains, make up 38% of the rail traffic in the state of Florida. And to give you an idea of the length of freight railroad, the amount of freight rail in the state, total 3,858 miles. CSX is the largest railroad in Florida with 1,627,000 miles. The Class 3 railroads combined are about 1,405 miles. And then Florida East Coast has got its line from Jacksonville to Miami, 562 miles. And the Florida DOT owns the corridor from Palm Beach into Miami as well that CSX, the predecessor railroad, sold to the state in 1989. And then the Norfolk Southern, our competitor in the east, has about 126 miles in the state. This will just give you an idea of the CSX network. Really, it's a rectangle from Chicago. We now own the Pan Am Railroad as well, back down all the way to Miami and then over to New Orleans. We are about 21,000-mile rail network in 26 states. CSX has about just shy of 22,000 employees, ship roughly 3.3 million carloads a year, and invest $1.8 billion of capital investment back into the rail network every year. Again, this is just a repeat of that map that we looked at, so you can go through that. And this is just a schematic of exactly what CSX looks like in the state of Florida. 3,000 employees in Florida, The important thing to look at here is, especially for the real estate community, we operate through about 2,280 at-grade crossings. And that's why when we do have a major industrial project, it is extremely difficult to get another at-grade crossing. This is something we look at on a case-by-case basis. And then approximately just shy of 1 million carloads in and out of the state of Florida, and almost every commodity in the country is shipped. I've also put a list of the short line partners that connect to CSX. We connect to every one of them in the state. And then just wanted to say, what ships by rail? You name it, it probably can be shipped. General guidelines: if it's 250 to 300 miles, the railroad really works well. Heavy products, maximizing higher weight limits. Anything that's heavy, that's moving a long way, works really well. And shipments that have more flexibility in a transit schedule. If you want something just in time the next day, then the railroad's not always the best option. And then what's a good baseline for rail volume? It's commodity and market specific. What doesn't ship well by rail is something very light, something that's more attuned to air cargo. Just to give you an idea of some of the products, this is what automobiles look like on trains. 2/3 of all light vehicles manufactured in the United States are shipped on the railroads, and this is what they look like. Coal. Domestic coal in the United States has gone away, but coal is still vitally important for the railroads. We have a tremendous amount of export coal leaving the United States, and the best way to do that is by rail. And then ag and forest products, of course, flour, fertilizer, ethanol, unit trains. The fertilizer that comes, the largest customer of the entire CSX railroad is the Mosaic Company in Tampa, by far. So that's a very important component that leaves the state. And then chemicals. Just give you all sorts of ideas. There's all kinds of transloading. Chemicals is very important. And then metals and construction: coil, slabs, structural steel, aggregates, cement. This also includes machinery, military, transformers, tractors, wind. We do a lot of work with FPL, with Duke Energy. We bring very, very heavy transformers into the state. Best way to do it is on the rail. If you don't have your own rail siding, this is an option of what you call a CSX transflow facility. It's a transloading option. We can basically move the product directly from a railroad car straight onto a truck. And then intermodal. Intermodal is a separate service. You've got merchandise service, which is the mixed freight. This is what an intermodal train looks like, really the container trains. And just to show you a schematic, what happens for direct rail, we pick it up from a shipper, we'll take it directly to the destination. But on the intermodal service, you'd have a truck from the shipper, would truck it to the railroad intermodal terminal. We'd put it on a train. That train would get up to the intermodal terminal at the destination, and then the truck would take it the rest of the way. So that's just a very brief synopsis. It's impossible to tell you all of it. I've given you my cell phone number up there, but I'm sure that, and I omitted to put my email address in there, but we can certainly make it available to you through the organizer. So thank you very much for your attention to the presentation.
Thank you, Aubrey. Our next speaker is Bob O'Malley, and Bob is the Chief External Affairs Officer for the Orlando Economic Partnership. Prior to joining OEP, Bob operated his own government relations firm called Right Track Public Affairs. Bob currently serves as the city commission for the city of Altamont Springs. I've been friends with Bob for a number of years. When I was as a county commissioner in Polk Counties, where I got to meet Bob. We had people complaining about the railroad and CSX. I called Bob. Bob became very responsive to everything I ever asked, and all public officials. So, Bob, thank you very much for that. Bob is also a past guest on the renowned Todd's podcast. He wanted me to say that. So Liz has given me the hook. So, Bob, there's your introduction. And I look forward to this. And thanks for being my friend, Bob.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it. I appreciate your introduction. Also appreciate the opportunity to follow my friend Aubrey and talk about railroads. So Aubrey covered freight, and as a former CSX employee myself, I know that God created railroads to move freight, but they also are useful in moving people. So I'm going to cover the passenger rail side of the freight railroads, and I'll get us back on time. It's not the first time a passenger train had to be late because of a freight train. But I'll get us back on time. I've got just a few slides, and my contact info is at the end. So happy to answer any questions if anyone has questions later on. So do want to talk about kind of joke about passenger rail, but passenger rail, freight rail is certainly important to industrial real estate and site selection, but so is passenger rail, but in a different way. It's important to commercial real estate and to site selection from a corporate relocation standpoint. So when companies are looking to locate or relocate to Florida, as I say, the top three issues are labor, labor, and labor, and workforce is the key factor that we're hearing when companies are looking at Florida, or at least in Orlando, in my standpoint, for relocation. And the labor shed available to an employee is impacted by both housing and transportation. And what we're seeing is because of housing affordability, workforce is having to move farther and farther out, but then that's having an impact on transportation. So passenger rail can help in that regard by providing people with different options for where to live and how to get to work. So it's an important component of commercial real estate in that regard. So along those lines, I'm going to talk a little bit about commuter rail, talk a little bit about intercity rail. I should mention I also used to work for Brightline, so I have that experience, and I worked for CSX during the Sunrail transaction. My comments on CSX would also apply to Tri-Rail too, though. So this is the CSX network as it currently exists, 61-mile corridor going through connecting four counties through the middle of Central Florida. And again, like I said, this connects, gives people the ability to live in Point Siena and work in a hospital in downtown Orlando. So for those hospitals, it expands their labor shed with regards to nursing and other medical employees. So an important component to the transportation system in Central Florida. In addition to the ridership along Sunrail, there's also been enormous TOD benefits, transit-oriented development. So a lot of commercial real estate and also residential multifamily have taken place around a number of the stations along the Sunrail corridor. So it's been very positive in that regard, and an important part, like I said, of the transportation system, but also the entire economy of Central Florida. I mentioned I talk about intercity rail, and as Dr. Harris mentioned earlier in this forum, that airports have allowed business executives and business travelers to really live anywhere, and we're seeing more people move to areas like Lake Nona, but also intercity rail allows that too, and there's a lot of business travel that takes place between Orlando and Miami and Orlando because of Brightline now. And Brightline currently serves, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and Orlando. And this is the station here at the Orlando International Airport at Terminal C. And a very popular system, and we're hoping to see that grow because it connects Orlando to Miami and vice versa, as I mentioned. From the Orlando area, as a soccer fan myself, we're excited about the World Cup, and we're looking forward to hosting in Central Florida a number of World Cup visitors. They can stay in Orlando, they can stay in our hotels, spend their money in Orlando, and on game day they can take the train to the stadium just south of Orlando, down in Miami. So. But provides all kinds of opportunities in connecting Orlando to Miami and Miami to Orlando, and all of the benefits that come to that from an economic development standpoint. So for our friends in Tampa, you're probably saying, well, what about Tampa? Or for our friends in Lakeland, Todd, what about Lakeland? Let me go back a slide. So Brightline does have plans to expand to Tampa someday, and I hope that does happen. And if for whatever reason Brightline isn't around, in the future, the tracks are there, and there's, the tracks will always connect Miami to Orlando, and there will always be an appetite to expand that passenger rail service to Tampa. So I'm a big supporter, big proponent of connecting Tampa to Orlando and Miami, and connecting those three markets, I think, would just be a huge economic engine for the entire state of Florida. So love to see that happen. And in that regard, there are expansions. There are plans to expand Sunrail east to west, and this is how the north-south Sunrail line would connect to the east-west expansion of Sunrail. And here's a better map. It's known as the Sunshine Corridor. It's a 17-mile corridor that would connect the Orlando International Airport using that same train terminal that I showed you for Brightline. It would connect with the Sunrail a transfer station along the north-south line, and then it would head over to the Orange County Convention Center and the theme park area. So it would connect Orlando Airport to the Sunrail, north-south Sunrail line, to Universal Studios and the Disney area. Again, a 17-mile corridor. This would be a shared use corridor. So both Sunrail and Brightline would be able to use this corridor. So this, in addition to connecting Sunrail to the airport, this would get Brightline 17 miles closer to Tampa, and it would get them on the I-4 corridor. So the rest of the way is easy. So this takes care of the hard part for Brightline. I should also mention, as I talked about Labor Shed earlier, this line would connect the communities that exist on the existing Sunrail line and the people that live in those communities. It would connect them to an additional 200,000 jobs along this 17-mile corridor. So you have roughly 25,000 badged employees that work at the airport. You have about 100,000 people that work near iDrive, around the iDrive area, and then another 75,000 plus that work around the Disney area. So huge connector, connects people to housing, to their jobs, and would be an important to Central Florida's economy. So this is a top priority of the Orlando Economic Partnership, and we are working. It's got broad-based bipartisan support both at the local level. Florida DOT has been very supportive of this, and I was just in DC earlier this week, and there's strong support within US DOT and within the Florida congressional delegation to make this happen. So we're excited about this, and like I said, this connects. It has a lot of benefits from a commercial real estate because it allows a company to for example, let's use Lake Nona again. So if you could have a corporate location in Lake Nona, you'd have access to local employees all along the Sunrail corridor, and also have intercity connection to Miami and then someday to Tampa. So really attractive, and it helps expand that labor shed for corporate relocations. And as I promised, here's my contact information. You didn't have to cut me off for me to get to this slide. So cell phone is listed there. My email is listed there as well. Happy to take questions now, but call me anytime. Don't hesitate to, if you want to text me, call me, or email me. I'm available anytime to answer any questions that you might have about passenger rail. And even freight rail. If you don't trust what Aubrey tells you, I can tell you the truth as well. So.
What do you see as the viability of private rail, the Brightline in the state of Florida going forward?
I think Brightline has really set the model for how we need to do this in the nation, right? It's something that private sector can't do it alone, but we know that the public sector can't do it alone. Just look at California, right? So Brightline really is a success story, and I think they've got some debt issues and they can refinance that debt, but they were able to build a railroad between Miami and Orlando when public efforts have failed, and they did it in 7 years, which is really impressive. And they were very innovative in their building. So I think it's absolutely. I hope that they continue. I hope that they're successful. But I really think more important than anything, they've shown us how it needs to be done. Private sector led. It deserves public sector support. You can say, oh, well, we're building stations for them or whatever. But we also in Florida, we didn't waste $100 million or $100 billion on a train from nowhere to nowhere like California did. So they really have set the stage and set the model for the rest of the country. And when you talk to US DOT, they see that too. So they're excited about what we're doing in Florida. And I think that's why the Sunshine Corridor is going to get a lot of support at the federal, state, and local levels.
Thank you.
How's everyone doing? I'm Randy Anderson. I've been enjoying listening to everybody's presentations, and everybody's had beautiful graphics. We have a picture of a bull behind it, and I'm talking about roadways. I'm not going to really share any other slides, so we're just going to do the commentary given the amount of time. I will tell you, though, that living most of the time in Orlando and having a place in Tampa, I spend a lot of time on roadways, particularly one of the roadways that we're talking about is I-4 and the I-4 corridor. But before we get into that specifically, what's really the core thesis of roadways when going through this 10-minute talk, particularly as it relates to Florida, I-4 corridor, I-75, Turnpike, 95? It's that modern logistics real estate, well, it's really talking about frictions reductions. Wherever you see infrastructure that can lower delivery time, it can cut costs or find inefficiencies, you're going to find capital that flows. I mean, highways are no longer just about transportation. They're really economic development platforms. So in today's market, really on a core basis, it's really about speed to customers is more important than cheap land. I mean, by the time we've all gotten done listening to these presentations, we'll all have packages sitting at our doorstep. In fact, probably even during mine, I'll have something show up. Also, in today's market, access to labor is important, maybe more important than ever. And network efficiency drives decisions. Network efficiency has become increasingly more important than simply just cheap land. So what is infrastructure really? Infrastructure relates to roadways, well, really infrastructure in general. It now shapes land value, it shapes tenant demand, and ultimately, again, that's where investors flow. So let's talk a little bit about highway systems and real estate value. So when do you get a new interchange? You get a new truck route. You got a new location of economic gravity. So in the industrial market, what do you optimize for? You are optimizing for faster delivery windows. You're optimizing for lower freight costs. You're optimizing for more access to labor and supply chain viability. So kind of as we start that core concept, that's where the idea that just the cheap land isn't the main metric anymore. It's not where the land is cheapest. It's where the network is most efficient, so the operating efficiencies can come into play, and you can synergistically look across the platform. So logistic users what are they doing? Are they buying land? Sure. But implicitly, what does buying land mean in this context? It means that you're buying time. And really, there's no more important value proposition for a lot of businesses than buying that time. And maybe we're not 1 or 2 or 3% smart on the exact land value. But if we can get really smart on buying time, we can make up any of that potential loss or inefficiency in that portion of the stock. So Florida, why does this work? Well, I mean, I think a lot of people have touched on a lot of these comments, but obviously not only we had, but we'll continue to have strong population growth. There's always ebbs and flows. This is a place where people want to come. They want to come and do business. If you look at even what's happened in the last few months, it's not, by the way, just people coming to retire. It's some of the biggest firms that never would have thought about coming to Florida. We're seeing major firms located, typically speaking, in Manhattan, San Francisco, thinking about, Florida's a good place to do business. It's very, very friendly. And it makes, by the way, the need for roadways, the need for transportation, the need for this kind of discussion that we're having today more important, even not quite exactly on par, but the need for even better and stronger educational modules as we start moving in that direction becomes even more critical. So we also have massive population consumption, a massive consumption base here. Again, making roadways very, very important. We have port and highway connectivities. I mean, you think about the corridors stretching all the way across the state. You think about the different nodes that we have inside the I-4 corridor that will take us north and south, which can get us not only all throughout the state of Florida, but can also help in full-blown U.S. commerce. So Florida really is one of the purest examples of infrastructure driving real estate outcomes. In the future of growing these markets and continue to grow as a population and continue to provide economic value is to making sure that we have the things in place to reduce the frictions to save the time, to have access to the labor pools in order to create value, not only for the economy, but ultimately that drives value for real estate at the end of the day. So, hey, what's the corridor that we talk about? Well, obviously, we talk a lot about the I-4 corridor. In fact, I probably drive on the I-4 corridor 3 to 4 times a week. And besides that giving me a lot of anxiety, it is interesting just to see the volume and massive traffic, where they're going and what they're doing, and developments that have come along the way. Obviously, it connects two very, very major cities. And from a real estate point of view, Tampa and Orlando are quite interesting. I mean, I look back on my career 20 years ago, everybody would have considered Orlando and Tampa a secondary market. They weren't even perhaps fully investable from an institutional perspective unless you just couldn't find anything else and you're looking for a value play. Today, when you start looking at cap rates in Orlando and Tampa, instead of sitting wide of, a Charlotte or an Atlanta or a Nashville, for most property types, they're sitting right on top of them, plus or minus a few basis points, based on recent CoStar data that I was looking at. It's a powerful statistic and shows the strength of these markets through population growth, through education, labor, an educated labor pool growth. And again, we need to continue to support that via infrastructure. So, what does all that do on the I-4 corridor? Well, the I-4 corridor is allowing for the support of e-commerce fulfillment. It also facilitates tourism-driven demand and distribution from coast to coast. So, a critical advantage of this corridor is that you can serve multiple major metro areas from one hub. So whether you're sitting in Orlando or Tampa, and as we'll talk about here in just in a second, you're sitting in Lakeland, you can serve a lot of areas from a logistics point of view. So let's take Lakeland. Lakeland sits almost exactly between Tampa and Orlando. In fact, it's a little bit of my halfway point as I'm making that drive on a fairly weekly basis. It's ideal for a one node distribution strategy. And that makes a lot of sense for a lot of companies, for a lot of businesses when you talk about the movement of goods and services. Lakeland really exists in a lot of reasons because it's the point of maximal logistics efficiency. I'll say it again. One of the reasons that Lakeland exists, and not just exists, but it will thrive and continue to thrive, is it's a point of maximal logistics efficiency. Again, it's not going to end up it's going to get more and more expensive, and that's okay. It's going to get more expensive because it's driving maximal efficiency gains. And that's ultimately what the core thesis is of roadways and while that's strong. If you want to move a little bit and you want to talk about the I-75 corridor, it's really the north-south background or backbone rather. And really, what does it do? It connects the Midwest to Florida. There's major national freight routes. It's very interesting on where the migration patterns and where people ultimately end up living if they're from Illinois or from Iowa. What part of the state they're looking at. Part of that has to do with where the I-75 corridor is and how it connects to some of those places up into the Midwest as we go. So its key uses, there's a lot of food logistics running up and down the I-4 corridor. There is a lot of cold storage, manufacturing supply chains. And again, it's benefiting because of the just tremendous migration, if you will, to the Southeast. And what does that do? Well, it increases Florida's consumption, and one thing feeds the other. So the outcome, what is the outcome? Well, we get more and more growth of these inland distribution, hubs, if you will, and expansion of bulk industrial, a lot of which we're seeing in those types of areas. So really, what does the I-75 corridor sort of has to do with the I-4 corridor is literally the I-75 ties Florida into the national logistics network and the movement of goods and services across the country. Very, very critical that we have these intersections happening at critical points in the distribution node and in the system. We got another pretty major road. We have I-95. I shouldn't really call it a road. I think the first time I was ever terrified driving was when I ended up on 95 up in New Jersey, just outside of New York City, and it was 6 lanes wide each way. So a road's probably a gross understatement. But nonetheless, I-95 serves a very, very dense East Coast population, sort of all the way up and down it. There's huge, strong port connectivity, and obviously A lot of things that went on a long time ago with the widening of the Panama Canal has made a lot of those East Coast ports even more important than they were before. So, for example, the strong port connections in Jacksonville are very, very important. And obviously, the I-95 corridor plays a very important part. A lot of goods potentially even coming from places like Asia end up rolling around through the canal and end up in Jacksonville and then ultimately making their way up to the Northeast. It's more efficient than running into the LA ports, finding their way to Denver and somehow through planes, trains, and automobiles. And tremendous costs and other issues, we end up with a more efficient outcome. It's also changed the nature of investing in those markets, what the relative value of East Coast versus West Coast ports are, and all the intermodals along the way. So again, thinking about it, demand drivers, you got last mile delivery, you got regional distribution and e-commerce. And also remember that even just if you think about it a little bit more micro, is that we're running out of the land's getting really constrained, if you will, in South Florida. So it's pushing some of those developments in Florida up north. And so when you're thinking about land, you're thinking about value, you're thinking about roadways, there's a lot of opportunities, I think, that are emerging as it's getting more and more dense down in South Florida. So what is sort of the outcome of all this from a roadway point of view, from a population point of view, from an fishing point of view, as it relates to the I-95 corridor? Well, I-95 is where, in very simple terms, is where density, you think about all the density on the East Coast, really meets with a logistic demand interest. So very, very powerful, very, very lucky to be part of that system. And that's going to continue to provide a lot of value today. In a market where real estate investing in some ways across most asset classes has almost been a four-letter word. It's underperformed the S&P 500. There was a time, certainly not today, when private credit was more attractive, and heck, we were getting better yields on money that we put in a CD than we got on some real estate deals for a while. Hopefully those times are starting to become behind us. And so one of the things that I was asked to address a little bit is, why are we seeing some speculative demand? It's like, well, it's tough, but developers are building without tenants in place. And why does it work? Well, there's really strong demand drivers there. You've got e-commerce growth. You've got supply chain restructuring, as we've talked about. We've got higher inventory levels. We've got much, much faster delivery expectations. Nobody's happy with ordering something and getting it within a week. It's either the day or tomorrow or the next day, worst case. So the nuance here really is that demand is structural. It's not cyclical. This is a structural move and a structural shift. Now, what I will tell you, though, is anytime you do spec developing, it's not without risk. So it's not like these insights that I'm providing today aren't known by market participants. A lot of people carrying the pen spend a lot of time looking at population movements, migration patterns, changes in roadways, changing in demand, who are also working and serving clients that are developers, people that are making those spec development decisions. So when you have information to some degree, that's a known. Well, guess what? Even though the demand's there, the demand's structural. And I don't think there's a demand issue, but the worry is you can still overbuild. I mean, probably many of you on the phone remember the time, or on the call here, remember the time when everybody just started talking almost for the first time about just how old the population is getting older. We need more and more senior housing, and everybody's moving to Florida. It was a couple of real estate cycles ago. Well, the demand was there. By the way, people showed up, but every single developer read the same report and it didn't work out. So again, the risk is not demand. It's the timing, it's the concentration, the location, and the type of supply that's put on in order to meet those needs in an ever-changing supply and logistics chains market. So let's turn to the Florida Turnpike, or the growth corridor, if you will. The Turnpike. I spent a lot of time on the Turnpike too, heading up to the Panhandle. It's not really just a road anymore. It's really a development corridor. It expands commuting range. It does open you up to some cheaper land. Again, although the cheapest land is not the only thing that matters, but it does enable large-scale development. Again, a large-scale development. So what does that mean? Well, if you have highway access, you get residential growth. And when you have people, Well, people need things. Well, what do they need? They need retail. They need services. Well, and they also need product delivered to them. So it creates also industrial demand. All that takes some of this land that was and is cheaper and starts to increase those land values. And I will tell you that you look at this and you talk to people, whether they're on Wall Street or Main Street, it's driving capital as people see those potential needs, those potential allocations. And if you look across all the opportunities in real estate, they start to look highly accretive and attractive as we sit here today. So, the turnpike is really shaping where Florida grows next. So roadways are tremendously important and continue to be important. So one of your questions that is not just a Florida question, it's really an everywhere in the U.S. question, is really on on housing affordability. And I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna tie it really back to logistics. So, as housing becomes less affordable, what a lot of people do is that they can't imagine. I mean, I think about my neighborhood and what a house of X cost in, I don't know, pre-COVID 2019 is now 2 to 3 times that X. And man, you just don't think of that being that expensive when you look at what that house is. And so what do people do? They don't really want to spend that much money on that house. And so they're kind of driving till they qualify a little bit. So as the housing becomes less affordable, people are continuing to move outward to get what they're looking for in terms of quality of house, land space. You got that dog, you need a fence. Well, developers follow rooftops. So as people move outward, you're getting that housing logistics connection. So I guess the basic order simply is that jobs in warehouses, well, guess what? They follow the people. And if the people are pushing out, well, so's real estate. Let's focus on both Lakeland and Ocala, and then I'll sum it up. The Lakeland Industrial has been a tremendous success story. It's been one of the strongest examples in all of Florida. Why? Again, because it's right between the two major markets of Orlando and Tampa. There's scalable land availability, and it has the ability then, because of its multiple uses, large scale potential facilities, and easy access to so many different distribution corridors, that it's attracted large distribution centers. I mean, nationally, globally large distribution centers with national tenants. So in a lot of ways, when you think about markets, and I just said at one point, with Tampa and Orlando weren't considered institutional markets, at least from a distribution point of view, from an investment point of view, Lakeland has become an institutional industrial market. I'll say it again. It's not even just Orlando and Tampa, but from a distribution point of view, Lakeland is now an institutional logistics market. And that's a really big deal. It's a really big deal for growth. It's a really big deal for land value. It's a really interesting way to think about that market as it emerges. Ocala is more of the next wave market. It's, obviously it's located along I-75. It's a little different than the Lakeland story. It's emerging. It's not fully built out. But there's a lot of opportunity there. Certainly there's the lower land cost. Again, not the final word, but lower land cost still helps, all things equal. There are large parcels. There's a growing workforce, and all these things mean there's opportunity. So there's a strategic role, could be an alternative to expensive core markets. So if for whatever reason you're priced out of some of these other issues, is that, hey, I can go to Ocala and still get done what I need to get done in a reasonable manner. So if I had to summarize what's going on there, is it's really where cost efficiency still is able to meet connectivity. So you can still stay connected, you can still be efficient, but you can also be affordable. So it's a little different story between the two markets, comparing it to Lakeland, but these have become very important markets, I think, with a pretty bright outlook. So listen, in the big picture, infrastructure determines a few things. It determines land value ultimately. It determines development patterns, which we all know. It determines capital allocation, particularly in industrial real estate markets. And of course, they all have synergies across the board. And so what I would say is sort of a final and closing thought is that Florida is experiencing a logistics-driven urbanization. It's where highways just don't support growth. They just don't support growth. It actually determines where the growth is going to happen. So with that said, I think we're on a good path, a good trajectory. There's still challenges. I mean, I think about sometimes when I'm driving around Tampa and trying to go a couple miles, how am I going to get there? It's going to take forever. There's still challenges in different markets in getting from A to B. But as these things continue to grow, we have all the right tools, more people, great nodules, great road connectivity. In fact, Florida's highways are no longer just for moving goods. They literally are directing capital. I-4, I-75, I-95, the Turnpike are creating new industrial hubs. And they're creating what? They're creating maximum speed. They get you close to labor. And they ultimately get you to an efficient business model that is very attractive to some of the biggest players around the globe and certainly within the US. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, appreciate your time today. Quick question. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act sent a lot of money to Florida. Do you see some of that money still trickling in and providing relief for some of Florida's infrastructure road projects?
I tell you, perhaps more challenging than that is we have some markets where you take for example the Tampa market, just the underlying geographical nature of the fact that it already got built out in a certain way, the fact that we got certain waterways in a certain way, we've got certain infrastructures that in place to fully free up some of that movement of people. Which can support more growth, can support more large companies, can support more infrastructure. We need not only capital, but we need some creative minds and thought to figure out how to move that forward. But yes, and we really do need to invest, not only continue to invest in roadways, but we also need to invest in really education. And the university system is doing a great job. It's really, we need to really focus on the K through 12. There's a lot of people that have tried, companies that have tried in the last 10 years to relocate. People get excited about it. They get excited about the housing options. They get excited even about the shopping, dining, and even some of the culture opportunities. When they came down, they were concerned a little bit in certain areas about the quality of the education, the crowding of the education, and some of the dollars spent in those categories. So we need to look, broadly at making this a better and continually better place for people to live, work, play, and ultimately invest in real estate.
Okay, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Michael Hinton here. I am the Region 8 Vice President of the CCIM Institute. I'm past president for the Florida chapter. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Randy, for that presentation. Just want to take a brief moment and just let all of you know where this whole project came from. A gentleman who was an economist and a big proponent of CCIM and the Florida chapter, Casey Conway, had a big presentation on the 5 R's: roadways, runways, rivers, rockets, and railways. And so we just want to acknowledge all the great work and support over the years from Casey Conway. And that's where this whole project came out of. And then now I'd like to jump into our next project, our next segment, rivers and ports. And so I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Mary Kay, if you would put up the part on the slide on the ports here. Craig Roberts is a CCIM, and he's the Director of Real Estate. In this role, he oversees all aspects of the Tampa Port real estate strategy, including property acquisitions, portfolio management, leasing, and development initiatives. He has over 30 years of experience in commercial real estate, and we're proud to have a CCIM here on our panel. He's also a mountain climber. So, Craig, welcome to the panel, and I'll let you take over. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, CCIM Florida, for having me today. I know we're going a little bit long, so I'm going to keep mine a little bit shorter than the 15 minutes. I want to give you first a couple bullet points about the port Tampa Bay. We have more than $34 billion in economic impact, supporting more than 192,000 jobs in Central Florida. We're the energy products gateway for Central Florida. We have an expanding container gateway for distribution centers and manufacturers. We have 33 million tons of cargo per year on and own about 5,000 acres of land. We're a major shipyard repair center. We're also a major cruise home port. And we have a Fitch A rating and stable outlook due to diverse portfolio and solid financial standing. I've been with Port Tampa Bay for 26 years, all of which have been in the real estate department. As mentioned, I am a CCIM. I was designated in 2015. My designation number is 21636. And also, I became licensed, my Florida real estate license in 1990 when I was 20 years old. So I've been in commercial real estate for more than 30 years. Sorry, I'm trying to get my mouse to here, having some navigational issues. And then I did want to go into history, some of the history of the port, not too much, just enough to explain how we started and how we got to where we are today. So, 30, 40, 50 years ago, Florida's top industries were tourism, citrus, and phosphate. And Port Tampa Bay started primarily as a phosphate port and was at one time the largest phosphate port in the world. We ship millions of tons of phosphate throughout the U.S. and the world on an annual basis from vast phosphate rock quarries in Central Florida, particularly Polk County. From this, we grew into a fertilizer hub. We combined the phosphate rock with other fertilizer inputs such as sulfur, sulfuric acid, urea, and ammonia. Port Tampa Bay has continued to grow with Florida by importing cement, aggregate, such as limestone that's used as road bases in Florida, in ready-mix concrete for driveways, sidewalks, bridges, and buildings. We import asphalt and granite rock used in construction of roads and parking lots. Florida is the only state in the U.S. that does not have any granite mines locally or in the state. So virtually all of it is shipped from Canada. Some of it comes, maybe by truck from Georgia, which would be the next closest state. We also there are imports of steel and lumber arise through the port for home construction, high rises, bridges. Port Tampa Bay is also the energy gateway to Florida. There are no petroleum pipelines for gasoline or other petroleum products to Florida. There's natural gas pipelines, but there's no pipelines to Florida for jet fuel, for diesel, for gasoline in the cars. So the only way it gets here is by ship. All the petroleum arrives to Florida by ship, and 43% of it comes into Tampa. We have an underground pipeline directly from the port to Orlando. It's an almost direct feed to Orlando International Airport. So most of the gas or most of the jet fuel that services Miami International Airport comes through Tampa. And the pipeline also carries diesel and gasoline. So much of the diesel and gasoline market in Orlando is also supplied from Tampa. And then we supply virtually all the jet fuel for Tampa International Airport, St. Pete, Lakeland, Manatee, and then a large portion down into Naples, Fort Myers. And so with the land that we own, we lease our land. We're a landlord port. We're not an operating port. So what we do is we lease those land holdings that we've built up by the history of phosphate exports. So one of our largest tenants is Kinder Morgan, and they're the company that operates that fuel pipeline to Orlando that I was mentioning earlier. A couple of our other large tenants. One of them is Mosaic. Aubrey mentioned earlier that Mosaic is their largest customer by far, and they're probably our largest customer as well. We have 3 leases with them. They're railing in phosphate rock from the Polk County area, and as well as the inputs that I mentioned earlier, the urea and the ammonia. And then that becomes fertilizer, which is shipped out, through the Mississippi River, up the Mississippi River throughout the Midwest. We have products, thanks to those rail connections. We're sort of attached to the hip and dependent on CSX to get our products past the 100, 200 mile radius that is more feasible by truck, to get our products, our cement and the fertilizer up into the Northeast, the Southeast, and even the Midwest, is through the use of the rail lines, the rail networks that CSX has. So from that history, we're kind of growing into some new areas in the last 10, 20 years. One of those areas is roll-on, roll-off. We signed a lease a couple years ago with Glovis America. They're part of Glovis Hyundai. They're the largest, operate the largest fleet of car-carrying vessels in the world. And just on Tuesday, earlier this week, we approved a over 30-acre expansion of that. They currently bring in about 50,000 vehicles per year, and they're going to be increasing that to over 100,000 vehicles per year. And about half of those cars stay in Florida, or more than half of them stay in Florida, with some of them, going up to the southeast portion of the U.S.
Hey, Craig, if I may, sorry to interrupt you here. I just want to make sure that we're acknowledging, did you have some slides? Because we just have the one Port Tampa Bay slide up there right now. And if our tech team needs to do something, let us know.
Thank you. I'm going to share one now. I'm getting into the
Great.
the container aspect of our growth. Bear with me. Here we go, I think. So another area that we're growing is, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes,
Doesn't
go
look
ahead.
Okay. So we're obviously growing now into containers, reaching the same markets that we do with bulk products, Central Florida. This has a bit of our history. We're also in the cruise market. We're going to reach about 1.8 million cruise passengers this year. The energy gateway that we talked about, the building materials to build, all the homes that Randy was talking about earlier along I-4 up to Ocala, down as far as Naples is where we hit by truck to impact those construction markets, supply those building materials. This has a map of sort of the areas that we reach, as well as Florida's growth. A lot of that is along the I-4 corridor, and then going a bit north to Ocala and down to Manatee, Sarasota, Naples. And the new container services we have connections. You can see here to China, Central America, Mexico, and also the Gulf, New Orleans, Mobile, Alabama. We have Evergreen, Costco, MSC, Hapag-Lloyd, Maersk are some of the carriers. We have a service by Dole and Seacat Line. This shows some of the growth in container volume since 2018. It's been a 200% increase. From fiscal year 18, we were at about 87,000 containers. Fiscal year 25, we're at about 262,000 containers. The eventual goal is to hit 1 million containers annually. The tariffs have impacted some on the container side, but I think sort of that natural growth that we're experiencing, it hasn't really brought the numbers down. I think it's just slowed down our growth. The other areas that we're seeing impacts from the tariffs is on steel and lumber. But all those other products that I was mentioning earlier, the bulk materials, those were immediately granted exemptions from the tariffs. We've had zero impact from tariffs, except for the steel and the lumber, I would say, and perhaps a little bit on the container side. And then also, I was asked to touch a little bit about the conflict in Iran. Perhaps surprisingly, we have not yet seen any impact on petroleum. I mean, I know we're seeing it at the pump, and your credit card is getting strained by that. But as far as demand, it's still very strong. We'll see how long that is able to sustain that if the conflict continues. So we have a container terminal expansion. We're going to be at about 100 acres for container storage. And we just received last month new gantry cranes. They're going to be able to accommodate larger vessels and more containers at a time to get the containers off the ship quicker. And we have refrigerated cold storage facilities that are growing, expected to grow. Here's just a quick summary of all the companies that come in, bring cargo into the port on the container side. Here's a picture of our the container facilities. It also has rail connections, so we can reach those further away markets, and also with heavier products, cars, heavy equipment. We have a foreign trade zone, which is very valuable for if there's any manufacturers that wanted to call on the port. And the last slide has some of my contact information. And I did promise to try not to go too long. I don't want to come between anybody and their lunch. So,
well, thank you very much, Craig. Really appreciate it. Can you just give us a quick, one quick question on what do you expect as far as cargo mix and trade lanes evolving over the next few years? Where do you see growth and demand for your port?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the growth side, it's going to be in the cruise passengers, which have grown tremendously, and in the containerized cargo, food products, produce from Central America, expanding markets or expanding the products that we see in containers from Asia, and we're more focused, I guess, on north-south trade, so Central America and into South America, but we also have good connections that we want to expand on to Asia.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, your presentation. Greatly appreciate it. Nicholas, thank you for joining us today. Next up, we'll switch the screen over. I'm sorry, Craig, thank you very much. Nicholas, I believe, is up next. Nick Primrose is the Chief Regulatory Compliance Officer at JAXPOR, where he currently oversees regulatory strategy and legal matters, risk management, insurance, procurement, and government affairs. He's a member of the Board of Directors of Select Florida to advance forward-looking solutions rooted in stewardship and service for the betterment of Florida. So thank you. Do you go by Nick or Nicholas? I apologize, but want to welcome you and look forward to seeing your presentation.
Thank you. I do go by Nick. I've got a quick PowerPoint that I can run through. I think would be helpful. So let me
go ahead and start sharing.
Okay. See, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And I promise to go very quickly. So JAXPORT, just to kind of give you a quick overview. Obviously, Jacksonville, the northern part of the state, we've got 3 different terminals that all operate very different types of cargo. But we're unique in that we're very spread out as far as Florida ports go with where our terminals are on the river. Very great for as this conversation goes. Jacksonville calls itself America's logistics center. And you can see kind of why based on this map. You've got all of the interstate networks, I-10, which you can either say starts in Jacksonville or ends in Jacksonville and goes all the way west. You've got I-95, which goes all the way north up the East Coast. And you've got quick access to our outer Beltway 295. You can get to I-75. You've got the CSX and Norfolk Southern both intersecting in Jacksonville, as well as the Florida East Coast Rail Line that kind of starts as well right through Jacksonville. And then where our terminals are is also very unique in that our Dames Point and our Blunt Island Marine terminals are actually intersected by I-295, giving cargo a very quick way to get from the docks onto a truck, onto the roads, and then out to the destination. JAXPORT is, even though we're a commercial seaport, we judge ourselves based on jobs and economic impact. We can tie locally 30,000 jobs to JAXPORT, 228,000 throughout the state of Florida, to the tune of $44 billion in economic impact through the Port Authority, which when you take all of the Florida ports combined, we're about 12% of GDP of Florida, which by my account makes us, either the 3rd or 4th leading industry for economic impact in the state of Florida. When it comes to our cargo business, much like Tampa Bay, we're very diversified in the type of cargo that we bring. And so you can see there on the left side of the screen, that was the pie chart of our revenue last fiscal year. Our bread and butter, we kind of call our bread and butter 3 different buckets: containers, cars, and break bulk, which are the things that don't fit into a container. So think like steel products, lumber, rolls of paper. Back during COVID, it was frozen meat and poultry items. So those are kind of the 3 target areas. We'll start with containers, and I'm going to do a couple of slides on that because we are Florida's largest container port. Our record was 1.4 million TEUs. With the way the economy is going, we dipped under that last year. So we're roughly in that like 1.35 million containers. That makes us the largest U.S. container port, or largest container port in Florida, the 10th largest in the United States. We're the #1 port in the U.S. for trade with the island of Puerto Rico. 90% of everything that is consumed, used, or in Puerto Rico comes from JAXPORT. In fact, we've got 3 carriers that primarily focus on bringing cargo from Jacksonville to San Juan, Puerto Rico. We're one of the top vehicle handling ports in the United States. By all accounts, we're the 3rd largest automobile port in the country behind Brunswick, Georgia, and Baltimore, Maryland. We're a strategic military seaport, the only one in the state of Florida, which means we handle military cargo on our commercial docks, both inbound and outbound. And you can see there kind of our FY26 goal. Our goal over by the end of this decade is to be at 1.6 million TEUs. Certainly the global trade war is, challenging that number. But as I go through a couple of slides, there's a lane and pathway to get to 1.6 million TEUs by the end of this decade. That really starts with our global connections. You can see on this map all of the different global ports that we've got direct connection to, and the various cargo types that come from those locations. So white being all of our container ports, orange being all of the ro-ro, which is the roll-on, roll-off, the vehicles, the crane equipment, the John Deere tractors and the like. And then the yellow is that break bulk. So, a lot of paper and wood products coming out of South America and in Latin America, tile goods coming from, the Mediterranean and Europe, but very strong connections globally. I know the question was asked as far as kind of where are we tracking. I can tell you our three hottest markets that we're going after are Southeast Asia. So, that India, Cambodia, the kind of all those countries in that area, as well as the Middle East, the Mediterranean, so Spain, Italy, and then the Americas. The Americas are probably one of the hottest markets for Florida. That north-south trade lane is incredibly important. There's a lot of transshipment that goes on in Panama, as well as Cartagena, Colombia. And so we really focus heavily on kind of attracting that cargo that's coming from Latin America and South America as well. But we don't kind of have all of our eggs in just one trade lane. We're very well diversified in our global connections. In fact, we've got a 6-member sales team that travels internationally on a weekly basis, trying to, attract more business in all of the different markets. And so while our sales team is off going attracting the business, we have to at home kind of be preparing the port to handle the influx and increase volume on that. So one of the big things that we've done, what you're seeing on your screen right here, is 2 of our terminals. The Dames Point is on the furthest left. It's that kind of smaller, narrow rectangle. And then on the main part of that picture is our Blunt Island terminal. That's 750 acres, primarily containers and cars. But we've spent a lot of money improving the Blunt Island facility because this is where the deep water goes to. And so in 2022, we finished a harbor deepening project. We went from 40 feet to 47 feet, which is kind of the gold standard now for international ports due to the Panama Canal expansion and ships getting bigger. So we've got 47 feet all the way up to right about this red line. And this arrow kind of shows you where the ocean is. So we're getting kind of the almost the largest vessels that call the U.S. East Coast to our international terminal, which is kind of all of this right here. It's about 90 acres. You see there the estimate, the cost associated. We had to redo the berth here, which was over $100 million to accommodate those larger vessels. We had to provide better grading so we could stack containers higher and build a larger densification. We've added more cranes to this facility as well. And let me do away with these. So you can kind of see as it zooms in on what that terminal looks like. And you have this entire blue footprint that actually just at the beginning of this year, was 100% fully operational. They were increasing their capacity to hold containers there. And it's phenomenal. It's a state-of-the-art modernized terminal, 90 acres, with access to 6 cranes that can handle the post-Panamax vessels that are calling that 47 feet of water. Now, we're not done. In addition to that, the port, our utility agency, our city, and the state of Florida are raising the power lines that, let me go back one, show you here, are right here. So you can kind of see the power lines. They're in the worst possible spot. Every single vessel that calls one of our 3 terminals has to go under those power lines. They're too short. The largest vessels calling the U.S. East Coast today need about 197 feet of air draft clearance. And so what we did, we got together with our utility agency and we decided to raise those power lines. That project is about a $120 million project that will be completed at the end of this year, which means come January 1st of 2027, Jacksport will be one of the few ports on the U.S. East Coast that has 47 feet of water and no air draft restrictions for the largest vessels. And you can see here on this slide, prior to our harbor deepening, the largest vessels that we could get were about 8,500 TEUs. Once we finished harbor deepening, we were getting 14,000 TEU vessels. And then once the power lines are done, we'll be able to get the 18,000 TEU vessels, the largest vessels that are calling the Gulf Coast and the U.S. East Coast, because we will have no air draft restrictions. To put that into perspective, none of the other ports, other than Port Miami, have 47 feet of water and no air draft restrictions. And so in the Jacksonville market, as we'll get to in a couple of slides later, that really unlocks a lot of commercial potential for these vessel lines and the commercial shippers that want to go to a place where they can bring the largest vessels that they've got, because these vessels are the bread and butter that are generating revenue. So a lot of really cool investment and things about to be finished here in Jacksonville that unlock potential. I'm going to shift over on the auto side. As I said, we're the 3rd largest auto processing port in the country. We do about 500,000 vehicles a year. These are all the brands that are coming into Jacksonville. And as everybody knows, it's more than just vehicles coming in. These OEMs and the processors that handle them need warehouse space to handle their parts distribution and things like that. And so there's a lot of auto distribution and warehousing tied to the port because of all of the brands that we handle. One of the big projects that we just did a ribbon cutting a couple of weeks ago with Governor DeSantis is the Southeast Toyota new build. They left our Talleyrand terminal that they had been at for 60 years, and we've moved them to Blunt Island. This was the artist rendering of the build out, over 300,000 square feet of build out, $170 million project, over 80 acres of processing and parking for all of the new Toyota and Lexus products that are imported from Japan, as well as US made Toyota products like the Tacoma that get exported out. So this is the artist rendering. This is what the building looks like today, fully operational with all of those Toyotas in the background. Phenomenal facility, creating jobs and also all of the ancillary products that need to be in the community to facilitate this building. In addition to that, I mentioned our break bulk. We're a national leader in this. We've got over 1 million square feet of terminal warehousing. You can see these are rolls of paper, but it's plywood, paperboard, cellulose, fluff pulp, bamboo, coated paper. We do over 900,000 tons a year in this product type. And actually, we're growing in this. We're adding another 200,000 square feet of warehousing on terminal in a partnership with Instructure. Why does that matter for everybody? All of this product is just raw material that gets brought to a separate facility to make whatever they're making: paper plates, toilet paper, greeting cards, diapers, all of the lumber and plywood that's going into home construction. So we're just a holding ground for it to get off the vessel and be at the port before it's distributed inland for manufacturing into something else. And the reason why we're investing so heavily in this is our economist has kind of been tracking U.S. consumers have a lot of demand for recyclable, reusable, compostable products. So that's why you're seeing an uptick in some of these paper products versus kind of the plastics. And the national trend is increasing. More and more ports are trying to capture the break bulk and paper product market because of the demand from the U.S. consumer. I always like to show this slide because it kind of shows that port growth, not just in Jacksport, but as was discussed in Tampa, and if you talk to any other Florida ports, revenues are growing in kind of all of the cargo types. And I've got a slide that kind of explains why, but if you're investing around the port communities, know that revenues at ports are up over 10 years in almost every single commodity type. Obviously, some of them are a little bit better. Containers, cruise doesn't really apply super much to this conversation, but cargo is increasing in Florida ports, which makes commercial real estate and development in around the Florida port community a very good bet. Now, I want to be realistic in this, so I do have a slide that's going to be a little bit of a downer, but I promise I'm going to end on a high note. The global trade war and consumer sentiment is down, and so all of the Florida ports and the ports in the Southeast, we're experiencing declining projected container imports. Some of us are faring a little bit better. You can see Jacksport, we're looking at about a negative 3.5%. Miami is close to -3. Savannah's -1, but we're all experiencing the same kind of projected year-over-year decline. But there's upside. You look at the forecast for June, that demand is increasing. So we are anticipating a year-over-year 10% jump in June, which I think we all experienced it over the past year, but I think we're all looking very positively as we get into the summer and fall months that those container imports will increase, and that will kind of get a more upward trajectory moving forward after a couple of months of negative import volume. So just wanted to do that. And you can see kind of compared to the West Coast, we're all experiencing it. So let me end on a high note here in these next couple of slides. Why is Jacksonville such an amazing location from a port perspective and commercial real estate? Strategically, from a location standpoint, we are the best port for getting cargo to 98 million consumers in the Southeast and U.S. East Coast. The cargo that comes into Miami and Port Everglades mostly stays in South Florida because it's too expensive to move it from there, throughout the state of Florida and then to the East Coast, to the Mid-Atlantic. Tampa, as was kind of mentioned in their slides, they're not really in the same size capacity when it comes to containers as Jacksonville. The rail connectivity that we've got, the road connectivity, as everybody on this call knows, truck drivers are limited on how many hours a day they can drive. So when we put this like yellow concentric circle, that's really important because if a truck driver can get to that location within their allotted hours, that all flows then where do distribution warehouses want to be? Where do container carriers want to drop their cargo? So we're very strategically located, not just for Florida, but in the Southeast US and the Mid-Atlantic, on where cargo can then get to a large percentage of the US population. We'll drive in a little bit deeper on that, focus just on the Southeast US population. You can see the projected population growth over the next decade, and what that means. So obviously we know that the hotness of Florida has kind of slowed down a little bit. 2 years ago, it was 1,000 new residents a day. That number is slowing down, but Florida and the rest of the Southeast United States still is the hottest real estate market and is projected to continue to be the hottest real estate market. So what does that mean for ports, airports, and then the commercial side? Start building here, because the population growth over the next 10 years is going to far exceed the populations in the Northeast and in the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic. Everybody wants to move to the Southeast US, which means we're going to need more distribution centers and warehousing and manufacturing space to keep up with the population growth. Let's go even more focused in Northeast Florida. You see the sheer investment over the past 2 cycles. From 16 to 2020, we had about $2.5 billion in roadway and port infrastructure investment. In the last 5 years, that ballooned up to $3.1 billion. You can see roads still in that $2.2 billion. I don't know why that's an M. And then the port, we've kind of tripled our investment to keep up with the population growth and the demand in this Northeast Florida market. Some benefits for everybody on the call. We've got the largest foreign trade zone in the state of Florida by acreage. We go all the way into Alachua County. We're the foreign trade zone operator, so we can quickly get your clients and your customers into the foreign trade zone, especially in today's global trade war. Being able to defer duties on your imports, no duties on your re-exports, cleared customs clearance, all of that. These are benefits for doing business in Northeast Florida in our trade zone. Here's just a list of some of the manufacturers that we've got that are continuing to drive growth through our region and all the ancillary businesses that help facilitate them. Here's a list of kind of all of the distribution centers over 100,000 square feet that have been opened in the past couple of years. You'll see all those in orange were opened once harbor deepening was completed. On the cold storage side, we're seeing a huge demand for more cold storage in Jacksonville. You can see there 24 million cubic feet of additional frozen and chilled space is opening or under construction. Again, all about the amount of residents that are moving to Northeast Florida. So there's a lot of upside on Northeast Florida tied to port growth in all these different sectors. And so even though I had a negative slide, I wanted to end on a positive. And with that, I know I went quick. Here's a QR code to connect with me on LinkedIn and my email. I'm happy to answer any questions here, but also please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through email.
Thank you so much, Nick. Really a lot of great content in there. And wow, Jacksport is really positioned itself in a great opportunity for growth. So all of our members and all of our viewers that are watching this, some really great things happening there. We want to thank you again for your presentation. We're going to bring up Miami, and respectfully, you threw down a few gauntlets, Nick. We will see what Miami has to say about being the biggest and the best. And I would like to bring on Helga. Helga Summer is the Port Miami Assistant Director of Capital Development. She handles and oversees all the design and construction of a $4.3 billion capital improvement program. Her division's current projects include cruise terminal construction and upgrades, cargo yard improvements, major roadway projects. She also handles replacement, realignment of bulkheads, and interesting shore power. And I saved that one for last. And we're going to talk about why Miami Port was in the news yesterday, for those of you that saw. But a little brief moment here. 2003 economic impact, 61 billion in economic activity through Port Miami, and so over 340,000 jobs. So Helga, we'll turn it over to you and start sharing your screen, and look forward to hearing see what you have.
Sure. All right, you guys got that?
Yes, you're on. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's technically afternoon. Thank you to the CCIM Florida chapter for the invitation and for bringing together leaders of transportation, infrastructure, economic development, and commercial real estate. I'm going to talk really fast because I know we're way over time. For those of you who may not work closely with us every day, let me take a moment to level set. Port Miami is not just a port, it's an economic engine. So as you just said, we generate over $61 billion annually. We support more than 340,000 jobs, and we serve both as the cruise capital of the world and the cargo gateway of the Americas. That scale matters because it drives the volume of construction, infrastructure, and opportunity that we bring to the market. So let's start with cruise briefly. I know we're talking mostly about cargo today, but last year alone, we welcomed over 8.5 million passengers through Port Miami. It's not just a statistic, it's a reflection of global demand and our continued investment in infrastructure. Over the past several years, we've delivered Terminal A for Royal Caribbean, B for Norwegian, V for Virgin Voyages, F for Carnival, and most recently Terminal AA for MSC. The letters don't always match up with the cruise line. But each of these projects represents hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, thousands of opportunities across design, construction, specialty trades, and support services. And we're not slowing down. We recently broke ground on Cruise Terminal G. It's a $345 million project designed for the next generation of ships carrying up to 7,000 passengers. On the cargo side, the story is just as strong. We've handled over 1 million TEUs for 11 consecutive years. We're currently number 2 in the international container port in Florida, but number 11 in the United States. What makes Miami unique is our trade mix, 48% from Latin America and the Caribbean, 31% from Asia, and 20% from Europe and the Mediterranean. So that diversity creates resilience and it drives continuous investment in our infrastructure. So I'm going to take a deeper dive into cargo for this audience. When most people think about a seaport, they picture ships, cranes, and containers. What they don't always see is that ports really are economic engines. We've been talking about the $196 billion annual and economic value, the $1.2 million jobs statewide. Those aren't just maritime jobs. Those are jobs in manufacturing, distribution, construction, logistics, warehousing, retail, technology, real estate. Every container that moves through the port creates activity far beyond the waterfront. And that's why the relationship between ports and commercial real estate is becoming increasingly important. So today I'd like to share how we see trade evolving in Port Miami and what infrastructure investments are underway and what that means for developers, investors, and businesses making location decisions across Florida. Port Miami has long been known as the cargo gateway of the Americas. Our strength has historically been that our connectivity to Latin America and the Caribbean, particularly for containerized cargo and refrigerated perishables. We have no draft restrictions. We do have a dredge depth of minus 52 feet on our cargo side. Over the next 5 to 10 years, I expect those trade lanes to remain critically important, but I also expect diversification. We're seeing manufacturers rethink supply chains following the disruptions of the pandemic. We're seeing growth in nearshoring throughout Mexico, Central America, and parts of South America. We're seeing increased demand for supply chain resilience and geographic diversification. We're seeing businesses place greater value on reliability and speed rather than simply minimizing transportation costs. So for South Florida, it means continued demand for logistics facilities capable of supporting high-value, time-sensitive cargo. It means more demand for cold storage. It means more demand for transload facilities. And it means growing demand for industrial space located close enough to the transportation infrastructure to reduce truck miles and improve velocity. From a real estate perspective, logistics facilities are no longer simply warehouses. Increasingly, they're extensions of the supply chain itself. One question everybody's been asking today is how tariffs may affect cargo flows. So historically, tariffs create short-term volatility. Importers accelerate shipments before implementation. Cargo patterns temporarily shift. Inventory strategies change. But over the long term, supply chains tend to adapt rather than disappear. Cargo still needs to move. Consumers still need products. Businesses still need reliable transportation networks. What often changes is where those products are sourced and how inventories are managed. So for ports and developers, that means flexibility becomes increasingly valuable. Facilities capable of serving multiple markets, multiple commodities, and multiple supply chain strategies will be best positioned for success. Similarly, geopolitical instability, including the conflict in the Middle East and fluctuations in energy prices, creates uncertainty, but it reinforces an important lesson. Supply chain resilience matters. When fuel prices increase or shipping routes are disrupted, companies place even greater emphasis on efficient transportation networks and dependable gateways. Ports provide reliability become more valuable and not less. At Port Miami, we're making significant investments designed to improve both capacity and operational efficiency. One of our largest initiatives right now is the North Bulkhead Berths 1 through 6 realignment, which is actually on the cruise side of the port. The project modernizes critical marine infrastructure while strengthening resilience against future conditions. But we're also making a lot of repairs and upgrades to our bulkhead on the cargo side of the port. We're also advancing improvements to our cargo yards to consolidate them, improve utilities, electrical systems, and landside infrastructure, including consolidating our cargo yards with ERTGs, expanding our rail systems from 3 to 5 tracks, and adding ERTGs there as well. And the construction of a phytosanitary and cold storage facility in partnership with Miami International Airport. Technology investments continue to improve operational efficiency and cargo visibility as well. Perhaps most importantly for cargo users, Port Miami benefits from direct interstate access and on-dock rail connectivity throughout the Florida East Coast Railway network. Those connections allow cargo to move efficiently throughout Florida and into national markets. For developers evaluating industrial opportunities, transportation connectivity remains one of the most important site selection criteria. The closer a facility is to an efficient multimodal transportation, the greater its long-term competitive advantage. Of course, every growing region faces infrastructure challenges. For South Florida, one of the primary constraints is land availability. Which was touched on earlier. Unlike some ports that can expand outwardly indefinitely, Port Miami operates within a highly urbanized environment. So as a result, maximizing productivity within the existing footprint becomes increasingly important for us. Roadway capacity remains another area requiring continued investment and coordination amongst transportation agencies. The success of Florida's logistics network depends not only on ports, but on highways, rail systems, airports, and local transportation infrastructure functioning together as an integrated system. For developers, understanding those network constraints is just as important as understanding the port itself. A question I often receive is whether there are opportunities for private investments around ports. The answer is absolutely yes. The greatest opportunities are often not directly on port property, but within broader logistics ecosystem. That can be cold storage facilities, distribution centers, container support services, transportation hubs, manufacturing and value-added processing operations. These businesses benefit from proximity to trade gateways while supporting regional economic growth. Successful development typically requires collaboration among ports, local governments, economic development organizations, transportation agencies, and private investors. No single organization can build an entire logistics ecosystem on its own, and partnership is essential. And increasingly, infrastructure investments and economic development initiatives are being coordinated to ensure transportation improvements support long-term private investment opportunities. So why Port Miami? So for companies evaluating, the answer depends on the cargo. So for trade with Latin America and the Caribbean, Port Miami offers exceptional connectivity and service frequency. For perishables and refrigerated cargo, proximity to the market can reduce transit times and preserve product quality. For high value goods, reliability and speed often outweigh small differences in transportation costs. So site selection decisions shouldn't be based solely on transportation rates. You should consider the total landed costs, They should consider inventory carrying costs. They should consider transit time. And they should consider reliability. A consistently predictable supply chain often creates more value than one that's merely inexpensive, and that's particularly true in today's environment where disruptions can be far more costly than transportation itself. Finally, I do want to discuss resilience. And in Florida, it's not just a future issue, it's a present responsibility. Florida ports are investing heavily in infrastructure designed to withstand hurricanes, storm surges, flooding, and other challenges. At Port Miami, resilience considerations are incorporated throughout our capital program. Whether we're constructing a wharf, redesigning utilities, improving drainage, modernizing facilities, we evaluate how infrastructure will perform not just today, but for decades to come. And in the case of surprises throughout the supply chain and throughout our just in general. These investments are becoming increasingly important to customers, regulators, investors, and communities alike. So for developers, resilience really shouldn't be viewed as a regulatory requirement. It should be a long-term business strategy. Resilient facilities are more valuable, they're easier to insure, they're more attractive to tenants, and they're better positioned to operate successfully throughout changing conditions. So, and I know I'm rushing here, but I'm going to close with this thought. Florida's continued growth is not guaranteed by population alone. It depends on our ability to build the infrastructure that supports that growth. And so that means ports, roadways, railways, airports, utilities, industrial facilities, and resilient communities. That's a lot of what we're talking about today throughout this agenda. So when those investments are aligned, we create jobs, we attract private capital, strengthen supply chains, expand economic opportunity. Ports are often where the global commerce enters Florida. But what happens next, where cargo is processed, stored, distributed, and transformed, is really where many of the economic benefits are ultimately realized. So that's why the partnership between ports and commercial real estate community are so important. Together, we're not simply moving cargo, we're helping to shape Florida's economic future. So thank you, and yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you, Helga. That was absolutely amazing, and you put so much content in there. That was really good. I would like to do just one very quick question. You probably know where this is coming from, because for those of you that are not in the Miami market, there was a local politician yesterday had some comments. The port of Miami gets all of its fuel from a parcel on Fisher Island, and it's sold just a few months ago for about, I think, $180 million. It's going to be developed. It's on Fisher Island, which is one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the entire country. And that has put the source of fuel for all of the ships in question. The good news is, from what I understand, it's about a year and a half away before any of those happens. Can you mention anything about this new development of what's going to happen with the fuel depot? I know it's in flux, and there's a lot of changes going on in the next year.
It's a lot, and the port is working on it with the support of a local local county, and so it's being negotiated. Sure. I wish I could say a whole lot more, but I can't right now.
I understand. It just hit the news yesterday, and this is such a timely situation for the port, and obviously all the great the economic impact of the port. We really, really appreciate you having the time to come and talk to us today. And again, great content. We will switch over now to the last segment, rockets, and would like to bring up Zahir Ali. He is the program director and professor of space commercialization and strategy at the University of Central Florida and the partner at Space Outcomes. He's a physician, a technologist, and an entrepreneur. He has advised numerous space startups and frequent global speaker on space economy and strategy, including AI and the future of work. So thank you, Zahir, for coming today. Really appreciate it. Real quick, there's about a $286 million in state revenue with NASA activity. There's 35,000 jobs. There's a $4.7 billion annual economic output for Florida involving this Kennedy Space Center. So these are really big numbers and a huge financial impact for Florida with the space station. So I'll let you take it from here. Thanks.
Hey there, folks. Sir, will I be able to share my slides really quickly?
Yes, go right ahead.
All right, perfect. And thank you for, giving that little overview. Um, let's see how I do this. I'm just going to do the whole screen and whatever Excel does to me, we'll deal with, right?
There you
Um,
go.
okay, hopefully you guys see all these slides, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So really quickly, the evolution of the space economy, right? 700 Common Era rocketry is invented in China. A Chinese noble straps a bunch of rockets to his palanquin, tries to go up. He ends up primarily going horizontal in many pieces. And that was the first launch accident in the history of civilization. So that's the era before we knew we could get there. You go to, our space race, Apollo, etc., Florida, had an outsized influence in that. That was getting there. Now we're in a regime. Then we got into the staying there regime. Florida continued to be the heart of launch as it is today in the world. And now we're in the era of doing things there. And really, we're in space 4.0, where we're looking at exploiting space in a very direct fashion. Space economy itself, globally, 400 billion in the last couple of years. This year's probably going to be between 5 and 600 billion, 3 trillion by, in the 2040s. There is limited launch capacity in the world. We call it the launch bottleneck. It's just real. But space activities drive many economic sectors. This is from back in 2019, but the numbers now are harder to extract because what's happened is, see, space is a vertical and a horizontal. What do I mean by that? Like telecommunications and the internet, you have towers, you have connectivity, computers, fiber, the software that makes the internet work. That's the vertical of the internet. But the power, the outsized paradigm shifting, civilization changing impact has been horizontal. It's been how the internet and that communications capability, information movement capability really has affected every single aspect of the human civilization and life. But it means it's actually hard to get numbers on what is the impact and what is. But in general, right, we're looking at high double-digit growth in global activity, significant, growth of commercial deployments. And this is where I want to focus, right? The infrastructure sector, the support, and that's where real estate gets lumped in. When you think about what real estate does and what the impact of space on economies is, I like to use the example of Canada just because it's a smaller example, right? The GDP of Canada and the population of Canada is smaller than that of California, closer to that of Florida. But the GDP is far smaller than California or Florida, actually, right? But when you think about what it does for Florida, let's break it down a little bit. You've got upstream, downstream, significant numbers. And what I want to start pointing out is things like terminals, ground, right? When you look at the economic footprint, you look at numbers of jobs created, you look at tax revenue, you look at GDP impact, and then you look at where it affects land and fresh waters management, farming, energy sectors, right? These are not things we think of as space stuff, are they? The reality is that space is a horizontal civilization shifting capability and frontier for humanity. It is not just deep tech. It is not just hardware. This moment in time is equivalent to 1495, right? 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. A few years later, everything in the world completely changed, and Europe started to exploit the new frontier that they had. The nice thing about this new frontier is that we don't have to worry about hurting people who are already there because there are no people there. There aren't even little green men as far as we've found. So far, nobody's there. Nothing's there that's alive. We can go get resources. We can go build stuff. We can go expand the human civilization. I was at the AIAA conference. AIAA is the largest international body for aerospace in the world. And I was talking to the CEO and CFO of AIAA, and I was at the space conference, Ascend, and I said, guys, in 10 years or less, the economic value and impact of the space economy will make aviation look like patty cake numbers. That's a reality. This is not speculation because this is changing the entire way that our civilization exists. That sounds crazy. That sounds gaudy. It sounds sci-fi. Believe me, it's not. None of you expected the impact of social media. I didn't. And yet here we are. Or e-commerce. These are black swans, as Nassim Taleb calls them in his famous book, Black Swan, for which he won a Pulitzer. The idea that there are things that we could not have predicted previously because they're so far out of our experience that even the existence of them doesn't make any sense. But that is what's going to happen. There are going to be space black swans. So let's get into what it does it mean for real estate. And I had like 6 slides, but I know we're running short and stuff, so I dumped stuff into AI and said, give me a view graph. So let's unpack this eye chart, which I know is a little dense. Let me get myself out of the way. I don't know why this Zoom giveth and Zoom taketh away. So when we think of this, right, the first thing you think of in Florida is launch, and therefore you think of spaceport. So that is an immediate direct opportunity because we have a major bottleneck. We need private spaceports. Kennedy itself, the Space Force itself, NASA and the Space Force have come to me and Greg Autry and Space Florida and said, hey, we need to get out of the business of operating spaceports because it doesn't make sense for the government to run spaceports when 80 or really in time, in 10 years, 95% of all launches will be for a commercial purpose. The government doesn't run all of our airports, does it? There are corporations. There are public-private partnerships that run these things. The government doesn't run all the ports. They make strategic investments, but there's a hybridization there that does not exist in space. So that is an immediate and direct opportunity for people who understand real estate, people who understand how to operate real estate infrastructure and logistics to directly go in and alleviate this bottleneck by creating the business models and making the investments that enable a transition from fully government run and operated spaceports to private ones. I'm not even going to bring up Spaceport America in New Mexico. It's just irrelevant. Nobody wants to go there. Right? You have Vandenberg on the West Coast with the same problem. That is, relevant. It's NASA and Air Force run, or NASA Air Force Space Force run, but they need to transition because there's a tremendous pressure to launch from Vandenberg as well. But the infrastructure there is all 60s at best. It's completely crumbling. And it's going to cost more to try to refurb and maintain than probably to tear down and redevelop. So there's a tremendous opportunity around spaceports, but it has to be done right, as we found out with the failure of the one in Georgia and a couple others, where there was poor community and stakeholder involvement, a lot of lawsuits, and a lot of lack of understanding of what it'll actually take to make this business case close. But I want to draw your attention to other areas in particular: manufacturing, assembly, integration, and test, and supply chain. We don't have enough high bays. We don't have facilities where you can bring the 10 different players together, integrate in a space-worthy environment, and then roll over to the launch pad. There's a massive bottleneck on downlink. And as we continue to launch tens of thousands of satellites, for communications of a different type. We don't have the ground stations and digital infrastructure. Companies out of Asia have been building almost a ground station a day in Africa for the last couple of years. And yet here in the US, we're sitting around on our hands. There's a tremendous opportunity because The technical people don't understand the real estate portion of this. So the partnership is going to be what's key. Energy infrastructure is going to be really important. And then I will also want to mention the knock-on effect in the general areas, right? It forces infrastructure development, water, power, roads. It forces capacity development and workforce development. You bring in workforce in kind of the, Gen 1, and then within 5 years, you need to have be breeding that workforce, whether it's student pipelines, whether it's local training programs, career conversion, all the above. And so, but you need the hubs to do it. And then there's the research and development. Um, we have a lot of this in Central Florida. We don't have nearly enough for what people want to do. And so the research and development space, more test stands for rockets, more thermal vacuum chambers. You're right. The big ones are actually outside of Johnson in Florida, and so companies have to go through Space Act agreements to go work with the government to do this. But the government is very limited. Those facilities are not super well maintained beyond the basic capability that they were built for. And the commercial needs and requirements are quickly going to surpass this. So when you look at how real estate impacts across the value chain, it's all the way across different areas. So depending on what type of real estate investor you are, what type of real estate developer you are, what type of real estate regulator, government supporting agency you are, every type is going to have a role to play in the space economy. And the numbers are gaudy, right? We're talking about, multiple $1 billion of economic impact, jobs, annual wages, and we are at the nascence. I know Florida has a spectacular history, but we've been resting on our laurels for far too long. Other ecosystems have surpassed Florida. West Coast, Colorado, Texas is making a big play. So Florida needs to invest right now, and there's an opportunity, particularly in the Central Florida, Greater Orlando, the Orlando to Cape corridor, for the creation of the Silicon Valley for space. But it needs far more infrastructure than an ecosystem that was built on chips and software does. This needs the roads. This needs wider roads. This needs different types of rail, possibly. It needs the communications. We don't have drop towers that are sufficient. And so, Greg Autry and I are trying to correlate turning part of the vehicle assembly building at NASA into a drop tower because it's temperature controlled. You can do a lot of stuff. It's got power, etc. But that would be one solution. Where is the commercial solution for this? Uh, all that type of infrastructure is necessary. And there may be an idea that, oh, is this build it and they will come? No, it's the opposite. The customers are there and they're going elsewhere and looking at workarounds because the infrastructure is not there to support this, right? So when you think of the overall big picture, you look at a 7.1 CAGR, but when you look at specific flows into space infrastructure, you're looking at near 30% CAGR, right? Let's go get a piece of that for Central Florida. Um, when yeah, we talked previously with talked with the organizers, I said I'll keep my presentation short. I know this is a bit of an eye chart, and I've slammed you with a lot of information, but I want to leave room for a few questions because I know this is a little different than the way that most of this audience is used to thinking. But I want to really help you understand how to think about this moving forward. And I'm very pleased to have all of you connect with me on LinkedIn. I think we're going to be doing more discussion of the infrastructure, particularly at Space Week at UCF coming up here in the last week of October. And I'd love you all to join in that conversation as well. So I'll stop here and take questions. But if you leave with three takeaways, I want you to remember, first of all, look, there's a tremendous opportunity. The investment is starting to flow, and the growth is going to be massive. right? Because space is real. It's not here to stay. It is literally what is next for the human civilization. Number two, there are multiple ways to participate from real estate and infrastructure plays all throughout the value chain. And lastly, Florida, and particularly Central Florida, is the place for space. So I urge all of us to think about how we can leverage that. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to leave this slide up and I'll take questions.
Great. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of economic development leaders that are here on the seminar with us, the webinar. What can economic development leaders and real estate professionals do to position Florida communities to capture more of the value from this launch economy over the next decade? You say there's a lot of growth and a lot of potential. What can we do to capture some of that?
So first thing is to engage. Like, I really appreciate the invitation from CCIM. Thank you, to Michael, you and the entire team, Liz Mendez, of course, as well, who reached out. Um, Having that vision is going to be really important. Secondly, leverage comparative advantage. What do you do well, and how does that map to what is happening in space? That should be the starting point. I've worked with leaders all over the world, particularly developing nations, and I talked to their leadership, and everybody said, "I want to do launch. I want to do launch. I want to do launch." I said, "Okay, great. Tell me your GDP." Okay, so you're going to spend 20% of your GDP over 5 years to do one rocket launch because all the infrastructure you'll have to build and everything. To do what? To show people you could do something that high schoolers can take advantage of in the US? It doesn't make sense. Whereas they have other comparative advantage they can leverage. So that's where you want to start. Third, look at your workforce and look at what your workforce has been able to do. This is a big discussion for me in Texas, where I think where they're throwing money at places, at companies to come in, and they're under leveraging the fact that they have a workforce that is probably the most talented and skilled workforce in resource capture in the United States. So what is your workforce talented at? Right? AI is going to decimate a lot of industries. It's going to destroy jobs, right? Let's not sugarcoat this. This is the reality, right? So when you're talking about economic development and you're talking about jobs in your community, that this is an opportunity to directly create a pipeline from those that are going to be affected by these megatrends over into a positive megatrend, because space is hardware, space is infrastructure, space is logistics. People have to do stuff here. We can't AI space. AI is critical to space, but it's in space, in outer space. On the ground here, we need people to do real things that people do. And so when you think about this, right, I would urge the every economic development agency in Florida needs to be at ECF Space Week so they can hear what's happening from the speakers that we'll have at The Economist. Understand where the development's going at the Space Settlement Conference, and immerse yourself in the ecosystem and start to understand how across this value chain you can apply what you're doing. Lastly, I'll just say for economic development agency professionals is to say, okay, space is like the internet. It's going to touch everything. So what industries do I have in my area of purview, and how are they going to be affected by space? How can they leverage space? Because that's something that I feel people don't think about enough. They see rockets, they see launch, but only 25% of the total revenues around space come from launch. And that number is going to shrink to 5% in 20 years. The real value is what we do there, what we produce, and how we close value chains then here on Earth. And so that's where people need to be thinking, not just about launch.
Appreciate that. It sounds like industrial and research development real estate is key to this, but
Absolutely.
could you briefly mention what are going to be the impacts? Obviously, workforce housing, hospitality, retail, mixed-use development. What are these other peripheral segments, and how might they be impacted by this growth in space and exploration?
Yeah, that's really here in number seven, the knock-on urban and economic effects, right? And I have multiple slides on that. So this is a big deal. We actually some students of mine and I we presented in front of President Ruto of Kenya, and they're actually building a spaceport. The Kenyans on that team are leading it. I'm kind of their senior advisor in the background, and this is actually going to happen. Kenya's going to build a spaceport. They have a massive advantage because they're equatorial, right? 7% advantage to Delta V. But why does the government care? Because they're excited about that knock-on effect. When you think about what has happened in Austin, what has happened in Phoenix due to tech moving into and developing in those areas, right? The upskilling, the investment coming in, right? The high end, high skill jobs, right? It immediately takes low wage to mid and high wage. And again, it's key that there is a pipeline for building that locally, not only importing that from states like California and Colorado and others, right? You want to build that locally. UCF is a great source because we produce the most aerospace engineers of any university in the world, right? It's the number one. Uh, but whether you're talking about hospitality, so when I one of the top investments in Silicon Valley in the last 20 years has actually been hotels. They have built so many hotels there because of the corporate travel and the need for that, particularly around launch, where you don't where you have surges in workforce around launch cadence. That's going to level out a little bit over time as we get to very high launch cadences and they start locate and companies start locating more permanent personnel. But right now, when I would deploy for NASA, to internationally, we would for the Sophia program, we would take 150 people, and in 2 months we would put $2.5 million into the Christchurch economy. Restaurants, hotels, tourism, car rentals, fuel, local maintenance, local parts and systems because we don't want to ship everything. It's too onerous. So we had to create our own little mini supply chain for the temporary time we were there. All of that is also going to come along with this. And as the launch cadence increases, what was temporary surge starts to level out to some level of permanence with significant surges on top of that. So there's a massive play to invest in the knock-on effects. The best analogy is always an airport. What does an airport bring to a community, right? It's all of the above. It also brings some frustrating traffic, and we'll have to deal with that as well. But that's also another opportunity, right? Can we increase public transport? Can we have the right types of roads and buses, the right type of light rail that could become very relevant? So all of those are going to create opportunities as well.
Great. One last question Raphael sent in. A comment on main challenges being presented by developers. They're feeling frustrated because of a lack of infrastructure, power, competing with data centers and entitlement issues. What can we do with local economic development councils to create initiatives to help overcome some of these impediments?
So one of the things about data centers is data centers don't produce a lot of jobs, right? So you got to go to your local legislators, your mayor, your government, and all the way up above that. Data centers sound great, but they don't produce a lot of jobs. They don't produce revenue for the community, right? So if you, the case is far easier, in my opinion, to go get permits from that standpoint, from the true economic development standpoint, right? Some people, you build a data center once, but then the maintenance is not on the building, right? How much value does that produce in time locally? Not that much. But this will constantly produce value because of the level of maintenance needed, the level of logistics needed, and the level of human interaction needed. Uh, Now, with the entitlement issues, environmental impact issues, etc. Look, Merritt Island is gorgeous. It is we have a nature preserve around a very significant launch area. Um, Otherwise, that entire area would simply be high-end condos, probably, right? So there's a case to be made for preservation around these areas and integrating the environmentalist concerns and thinking with the development. But that requires stakeholder and community engagement, which sometimes business communities can be very poor at. And again, I refer you to what happened in the spaceport, spaceport Georgia, where they just failed at that, right? The lack of infrastructure is something that, and the power issues are both things that we can motivate, saying, look, we are going to be able to create N number of jobs, N number of value, but we need support. We need and the recent changes in regulations around small modular nuclear reactors and other types of energy sources are really going to help with this discussion. And then the infrastructure investments, could this be done in public-private partnership? For example, in New Zealand, right, Rocket Lab underwrote a tremendous amount of infrastructure development around their needs that then was turned over to the public to maintain and operate. And so creative ways. One of my students, when we delivered a report on this to Del 10 and Space Florida, he actually was the one who came up with the idea of leveraging public bonds in a strategic way to fund this. And now you're seeing that actually, because I got up all the way to the legislature, I believe, you're actually now seeing that in play. So more out of the box thinking in terms of the financial leverages and vehicles to create the public-private partnership. But that needs to be done for the roads. That needs to be done for landfill so that we can expand certain areas to be more usable as well. Does that answer the question, Michael? Is that helpful?
Yes. And this is absolutely fascinating, and I'm glad I volunteered for this segment because I just find this entire future investment is just fascinating, and we could probably talk about it for 2 or 3 more hours. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I just want to thank you, Zahir Ali, for your insight, your comments, enlightening us on this amazing opportunity for expansion with rockets. And I will, again, thank you very much. Bring Sage back on. He is our Florida CCIM chapter president, and he will thank all of our panelists and close us out.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for being on the call today. A lot of great information. We are going to get all of the slide panel shows put together. We will also have this video posted on our website at www.flccim.org, and we will also put it on our YouTube channel. If you do have any questions, reach out to one of us, and we will see if we can get some of those questions answered privately and send those out to you. But really appreciate everybody's in-depth analysis and hope everybody enjoyed the forum. Thank you.